Good evening and welcome to the Matthews Board of Commissioners meeting for June 14th, 2021. I'm Mayor John Higdon. The board and staff met previously at 5 o'clock to discuss the hiring practices of the town. And now we're ready for our regular meeting. I'd like to start with some introductions to my, wow, got a fan, all right. To my left and your right is our Assistant Town Manager, Becky Hawk. We have Commissioner Jeff Miller, Commissioner Larry Whitley, Mayor Pro Tem Renee Garner, Town Manager Hazen Blodgett, Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, Commissioner Dave Bland, Commissioner John Urban, Commissioner Ken McCool, our Town Clerk Lori Canapino, Planning Director Jay Camp, and our Information Coordinator Maureen Keith. To remind everyone, this meeting of the Board of Commissioners is being held both in person and remotely. Any member who is attending remotely will be called on by name and state their vote verbally for the record. Also, I'd like to explain that there's going to be two opportunities for comments tonight. Agenda item number 6, which is our public comment, is for 4 minutes on anything unrelated to the budget public hearing for those that signed up in advance. Folks will be able to comment on the budget without signing up in advance during the budget public hearing. I'd like to move on to agenda item number 2, which is the invocation tonight. Jeff Miller, Commissioner, will take care of that. Thank you.
For those who choose to share in prayer, let us bow our heads. Dear God, you have said that where 2 or more are gathered in your name, that you will be with them. We ask you to be with us now. Bless us and provide us with the guidance to guide the business brought before us tonight. May we prove worthy of the confidence placed in us by our fellow citizens. May we be honest in our actions and make the best decisions, not only for today, but for years to come. Please help the country heal from the divisiveness that we have witnessed during the past year. Please also comfort and protect your healthcare workers in the front lines against COVID. As we all know, freedom is not free, so please keep watch over the men and women in the military, the police, and the fire departments as they serve and protect all of us. We thank you for our civil liberties and freedoms, for our privileges and our opportunities. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 4. Tonight I want to recognize Pollinator Week. Some of you may know that I am a beekeeper, or bees stay at my hive at my house until they decide to swarm every year. But nonetheless, I'd like to present a proclamation to Gretchen Reed in recognition of Pollinator Week. Whereas pollinator species such as birds and insects are essential partners of farmers and ranchers in producing much of our food supply, and whereas pollination plays a vital role in the health of our national forests and grasslands, which provide forage, fish and wildlife, timber, water, mineral resources, and recreational opportunities, as well as enhanced economic development opportunities for communities. And whereas pollinator species provide significant environmental benefits that are necessary for maintaining healthy biodiverse ecosystems, and whereas the state of North Carolina has managed wildlife habitats in public lands such as forest and grasslands for decades, and whereas the state of North Carolina provides producers with conservation assistance to promote wise conservation stewardship, including the protection and maintenance of pollinators and their habitats on working lands and wildlands, and whereas the town of Matthews is committed to the management of landscapes, parks, and public land to protect and enhance pollinators, and encourages businesses, developers, and residents to promote wise conservation stewardship in landscaping, including the protection of pollinators and maintenance of pollinator habitats. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the town of Matthews does hereby proclaim the week of June 21st through 27th, 2021 as Pollinator Week, and urges all citizens to recognize its observance. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the town of Matthews to be affixed this 14th date of June 2021. So, Gretchen, you're here. Would you? Absolutely. Please step up to the podium.
Thank you, Mayor Higdon. On behalf of Bee City USA, I want to thank you and the town of Matthews for the continued support and enthusiasm for not just protecting our pollinators by providing a safe and healthy habitat such as the Country Place Pollinator Garden, but also promoting their general enjoyment. It has now been 8 years since our town was first designated as Bee City USA, and we look forward to continuing our relationship. Just a couple things to highlight as Pollinator Week is that people can check out the pollinator display at the rear entrance of the library downstairs. They can also follow Bee City USA Matthews on Facebook, where I will be sharing articles, webinars, and fun facts, not just for this week, but ongoing through our efforts working with the town and Bee City USA. And then also people can look for us at the upcoming farmers markets, where we have our famous, I think, observation hive, which is always a hit to actually see the bees up close just behind glass. And we hope to be there over the next year a couple times.
Thank you very much. I'd like to present this morning. We can take a photo. I'll share, I think, a funny story. I don't know, maybe the bees thought it was funny, but when I first started beekeeping, getting into it, I asked the person that was mentoring me, I said, how close can I get with my lawnmower to my hive and not disturb the bees? And he said, oh, don't worry, you'll figure it out. I learned not to wear shorts when I mowed the grass after that. I'd like to also encourage those of you that haven't walked through the Pollinator Garden that Gretchen mentioned to check it out. It's right near in front of Country Place near Matthews United Methodist Church. And Will and Martha Krause kind of head up the effort to maintain that Pollinator Garden, but there's lots of pollinator type plants there and lots of bees and butterflies. It's a really nice place to take children. A lot of the plants are labeled, so kind of interesting. Move on to agenda item number 5. Mr. Manager, do we have any items to be added to the agenda tonight?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Move on to item 6, public comment. Again, we will allow 4 minutes per speaker. And tonight, we're going to start with Mr. Salim Baraksai. Please state your name and address for the record.
Salim Barakzai, 105 Matthews Township Parkway, North Carolina, 28105. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, board members, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to talk about the UDO amendment, which was proposed to the planning board in their last meeting. And I could not speak, but as I was watching the meeting, I was under the impression that the board members, they were under a fear that if the proposed amendment went through, town of Matthews will be inundated with 6-foot tall fences everywhere. That was the fear they had. So I like to just say to you that the 7 houses, I mean, we are back to square. Okay, let me. I'm just looking at the clock and going backward and forward. Okay, so I'll let you know that 7 houses in my neighborhood, our back lane is our entrance. So, but because it is legally backyard, we can have 6-foot fences there. But guess how many houses have any fence at all? 0. Why? Because it is entrance of our guests, our friends, our relatives. We don't want to erect fences there. None of the houses have an inch of fence because it's your front yard. People come through that one. You want to make it beautiful. You don't want to make it ugly. But backyard is a different story. Backyard is where you relax, where you want safety for your pets, your children. Backyards and front yards are like kitchen and bathroom. Unless you want to poo in the kitchen and do something else in the cook in the bathroom, no person in their right mind will do that. And our neighborhood is an example of it. Legally, we can put six-foot fences, but none of the houses have any fences at all. It's beautiful, it's all plain, it's leveled, there are flower beds, everything. So I think that fear that town of Matthews will be inundated with 6-foot fences was incorrect in my opinion. Secondly, we seem to be back on square one. Last November, we were directed that the Board of Adjustments can accommodate our request and approve they have the power to approve 6-foot fence in the front yard because we treat it as our backyard. 3 of the 7 houses applied. Of course, there was a fee and other things, formalities, but 3 of the 7 houses applied. 4th house gentleman came and he talked to the Board of Adjustments, but the Board of Adjustments denied all of them. While they were denying, they also directed the planning department to come up with an amendment to UDU, which the planning department, they worked hard and they proposed an amendment and the planning board refused it. So we are going back in circles, but I think that amendment will close that little weakness in the current UDO, which puts people like me in a difficult situation, in an intolerable situation. So I would support that amendment and I would request you to let the planning board have a look at it. As I said, no person in their right mind are going to put 6-foot. I mean, they can now erect 4-foot fences, but how many 4-foot fences do you see? None, because it's the entrance. People like to beautify their entrance to their house. Their friends, their guests, they are coming through it. They don't want to make it ugly, but the backyard is a different story altogether. You want to relax there. You want your children to play. You want your animals to play. And you want to have a peace of mind that you are not risking their safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have Oleg Konik? Again, please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Oleg Konik, and my address is 119 Matthews Township Parkway, Matthews. Hello, everyone. I am the neighbor of our previous speaker. So just want to share a few more details so everyone can better understand what kind of challenge our tiny little neighborhood of 7 houses is facing. So number 1, out of 7 houses, we have 4 homeowners that purchased the properties within the last 2 years. I myself bought it less than a year and a half ago. When we were buying our houses, we all understood what the backyard is. My house was a brand new one, and my supposedly front of the house looks exactly like back of the house. So there was an issue where when the plan for the building was approved, someone missed the fact that the house is flipped if we want to assume where the front and back is. Another challenge is that we were talking a lot about 5-foot fence, a 5-foot wall that is in front of our properties. It's actually not 5 feet if you look from my front yard. It's more like 3 feet because the elevation of my lot is higher. So I literally, when I go to my actual backyard, all I can see is passing cars on the NC 51. We all agree that the nice vegetation is required, to hide fences, and it's all doable on our properties. But it pretty much ruins the whole experience of home ownership on that corner, because we don't have a backyard and we don't have a front yard, because they're both flipped. So we cannot afford to put a fence in our actual front because it's going to be ugly, just like my neighbor just said. But we also not allowed by law to put the fence where the real backyard is. It might be a little confusing, but you can think about 7 of our houses not having backyard, while it's the third of an acre of the land that I own. So big lot, but pretty much useless because we can have zero privacy. And we were also impacted by the tornado that torn away most of the trees. So it's just open field. So yes, those are just the few points. I understand that it's very isolated issue of this neighborhood. I'm not pressing that we need to allow the whole town to do the same, but I really hope that we're gonna find a solution for our particular issue that is fairly isolated and the same for all 7 houses. Another little piece of information. Right now we have 3 properties with the fences already built up, and my own fence is halfway done because I realized that there is a problem when I was halfway done. So it's really frustrating for all of us to face this challenge, especially as the first-time homeowners. And while I am grateful for all the work that was done by the planning department and by the time for the time that the board of commissioners spent on this issue, it might sound like very common problem to hear about fences, but our neighborhood does have a unique challenge. So I really hope we as a community gonna find the right solution that will solve our problem, but not gonna create any issues for the town as whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. Lori, do we have Mark Tofano remotely?
We're not going to show the timer visibly, so it'll just be audible.
Okay. Mr. Tofano, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Can we? Not particularly well. Maybe we can turn the volume up a little bit.
One, two, three, four.
We're working on it. 1 minute, please.
Okay.
Mark, can you test the sound again, please?
Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mark Tofano. Let me see, there's nothing really I can do on my end.
Yeah.
See, there's nothing really I can do on my end.
That seems to
Any-
have worked. Hold,
Any
wait.
better?
Hold, please.
Okay. See, there's nothing really I can do on my end.
That seems to have worked. Hold,
Any
wait.
better?
Hold, please.
Okay. See, there's nothing really I can do on my end.
You guys didn't know I was a ventriloquist as well. That seems to have worked. Hold, wait. Are we good? All right, Laura, are you going to take mind the time? Okay, Mr. Tofano, go when ready, sir. Wait a minute, we can't hear you. Hold.
Mark, can you try testing it again? Yeah.
Mayor, we'll ask you to skip Mr. Thomas in a moment. I will contact him and we can go with that in person.
Okay, Mark, we're gonna skip over you and come back in a moment. Alicia MacArthur, are you here? Again, please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Alicia MacArthur, 523 Deer Creek Drive. I didn't realize fences were the theme tonight. I'm here today to ask for consideration regarding our fence. Specifically, we live on the corner of Deer Creek Drive and Newburgh Lane in the Pine Forest neighborhood, and our backyard fronts Newburgh Lane. When we bought our home 16 years ago, it came with a fence that's about 3 feet off the road. In March of this year, we received a citation that our fence violates a town ordinance enforcing a 15-foot right-of-way from the road and needs to be removed, and we've been attempting to explore our options since. In that light, we'd like to ask the council to consider either specifying that fences are acceptable encroachments or to otherwise revisit the ordinance, and that ordinance is 95.30, and rework the wording so that it's able to be applied consistently and fairly. To that end, we'd like to make the following points. And I say we, my husband would like to be here tonight, but we have too many kids going in too many different directions for him to be here too. To date, we've been declined an encroachment agreement because state law makes it clear that there is no grandfathering with road right-of-ways. We absolutely agree that state law allows towns to enforce the right-of-way, but we disagree that state law compels the town to enforce a 15-foot right-of-way on every street and precludes grandfathering. It's clear from a quick search on town ordinances across the state gives towns discretion in how they apply the law. In fact, the town of Cary acknowledges that fences in residential areas are acceptable encroachments with an agreement, as long as they do not cause a safety issue, interfere with the functioning of the street, or cause damage to the street, curb, or sidewalk. The town of Waynesville also allows for fences as encroachments without agreements. There seems to be a general understanding across most of the state that encroachments that meet certain criteria and do not cause safety issues are acceptable. The owners just accept that if the town or state or utility needs access to the property, it may be at the owner's expense. The town ordinance that we have allegedly violated by keeping our fence begins with after the effective date of this ordinance, which was in 1998. The wording here seems to imply grandfathering for structures or fences in the right-of-way before the ordinance. Combined with the state precedents, which clearly gives towns the leeway in how they protect and maintain right-of-ways on town-owned roads, we're struggling to understand why our fence is a problem. We did a little digging and determined that our fence was installed no later than 1993, and we've sent letters from 2 different neighbors to Mr. Blodgett attesting to this. I'm glad to provide them to anyone else who would like to see them. It would be hard for the town to argue that it's a safety issue or that it interferes with the road when they've allowed it to be there for nearly 30 years. The fact that the town does not actually enforce the ordinance unless a complaint is made or once they become aware of it, which is what we've been told, supports the idea that the ordinance itself doesn't particularly make sense and isn't necessary to enforce on every street. It really is a one-size-fits-all law when all streets are not the same. We respectfully ask the council to revisit this particular ordinance. A law that is not enforced equitably defeats the purpose of the law itself to be just and fair. We can drive around town and easily find a half a dozen violations of this ordinance. However, we would not want to report them because we would not want our neighbors to endure the same stress and loss we've been facing. We've cultivated a garden and blackberry bushes that our neighbors also enjoy in this 15 feet and have been dismayed at the possibility of losing the literal fruits of our labor. We've looked at the options through the town website, either to appeal for interpretation of a zoning ordinance or to request a UDO text change, but neither seem to quite fit our situation. And so I'm here asking the council to look into this situation further. Thank you for hearing me. I'm glad to answer any questions personally should you need to reach out to me.
Thank you. Sure. Town manager, would you like to comment on this?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. So normally we don't make it a habit of commenting during the 4-minute talks, but I was going to do this under the manager's report. So we were made aware of the fence in the right-of-way, road right-of-way. I sign off on encroachment agreements. I've never signed off on one of this type of fence in the right-of-way, so that's what we said by email is complainants, plaintiffs, whatever, need to follow the code about this. However, other towns in North Carolina do allow folks to put fences in the right of way with, provided there's an encroachment agreement. So what we could do is provided the board's comfortable with this, is I could put together, we could look at Carrie's, I mean, they're a good model as an organization, see what they're doing, put something back on the agenda for the town board to consider. I do not think it's an ordinance amendment. I haven't, Charlie, town attorney, and I have not converged. So I feel like it's something we could do at the next, we could put on the agenda and do it at the next meeting.
Very good. So, thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Mr. Rose, Doug Rose, you have a public comment, sir? Please state your name and address for the record.
Doug Rose, 737 Elizabeth Lane. So good evening, Mayor Higdon, Board of Commissioners. Again, I'm Doug Rose. I'm a resident of Matthews and the current chairman for the Matthews Veterans Advisory Committee. My remarks will be in reference to tonight's item 11A on the agenda. So reference the town board meeting dated March 21st, 2021. The drawing that you see up here, which probably Mark is going to refer to also, which I will refer to as a delineation drawing, was presented by the town manager during the board meeting and represents the preliminary boundaries for the park as voted on and approved. Mayor Higdon at that time stated that the remarks, in his remarks, that the proposed, the proposed park, the Matthews Veterans Memorial Park includes the entire section to the north. So when I'm saying the entire section to the north, if you look at the red line drawing, it'll be the upper left corner of that red line that's up on there. Okay. Furthermore, Mr. Blodgett elaborated that the red line was a start point for the vote and that the line was still up for discussion. My point is in the drawings that were depicted by Stewart Engineering, which you will see later on during the brief in item 11A, the entrance to the left side of the park at the left end of the Mediation Garden and Historic Walk encroaches a good portion of the top left area of that area up there. I do not believe, and I'll wait for Mr. Corey King's comment, that Stewart Engineering was provided a copy of the delineation line drawing. There is quite a bit of dead space in that upper left corner of the park, which was already enhanced by Public Works and the American Legion, that could be used for future Veterans Memorial Park items. Again, MVAC is not advocating that we would want to inundate the park with too many items. As stated previously by many folks, less is more. I'm asking that the Board of Commissioners to consider the delineation drawing when they review the 4 drawings from Stewart Engineering. Mr. King informed the key stakeholders that he will be taking in all inputs and presenting them to the board at a future town meeting. MVAC looks forward to working with all the key stakeholders, and we hope to come to a consensus to present you at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Are we ready with Mr. Tufano? Okay. Mr. Tufano, we're going to try you one more time here in a moment.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you on a telephone, see if it comes across.
Everybody can hear that? Just speak loudly, sir. Go ahead. Start when ready.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, and staff. My name is Mark Tufano, and I live at 259 South Trade Street in Matthews, North Carolina. And it was my intention to be there in person with you tonight, but I got in a wrestling match this weekend with a very large poison ivy vine, and I lost. But I'm itching to get started on my comment. So, Lori, if you would be so kind as to put up the first slide. I think that's showing right now. Thank you. On March 22nd, 2021, the Board of Commissioners voted unanimously to establish the Matthews Veterans Memorial Park, and I thank you so much for that. The vote established both the park and its boundaries, as shown by this photo, which was displayed during the meeting. Any comments made regarding variations to the boundaries that may occur as a result of conceptual renderings submitted by a design firm have no bearing on the fact that the park boundaries were firmly established without any room for interpretation. Lori, would you go to the next slide, please? Later in the agenda, you will be presented with these renderings, none of which properly address the boundaries of the park as defined and approved by the Board of Commissioners. The left edge of the Matthews Veterans Memorial Park is not at the leftmost boundary, but instead has been moved into the park, thereby eliminating approximately 30% of the park footprint, which was approved. It confuses me how a design firm with the capability of Stewart Incorporated would not provide any renderings which properly position the entrances to the park, and in doing so would seemingly dismiss the will of the Board of Commissioners and disregard the input of the veteran community, as well as a large number of Matthews residents. Also, with the exception of the small portion of the Memorial Walk rendering, which is in the lower left corner, a delineation does not exist between Stonetown Park and Matthews Veterans Memorial Park that would be noticed by an attendee of either park. Lori, next slide, please. Thank you. There's been references made by town staff to the memo of April 9th, 2021, especially the second bullet point. Action of these two spaces should be seamless and provide a benefit for each. It appears from the renderings that the definition of seamless is invisible, and something consisting of nothing could not be beneficial to anyone or anything. I can say for myself and for the many veterans that have contacted me to speak on their behalf, all of these renderings are unacceptable, and I am sad to say, disappointing. Thank you very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Tufano. We'll move on to Bob Klein.
Hello, I'm Bob Klein, and along with Brandon Mills sitting over there, we own Stumptown Station at 107A North Trade Street. I'm here today. Well, first I wanted to thank all of you for your service, and more importantly, coming to our rescue, convening an emergency meeting 8 o'clock at night on a Friday night to decide on approving us some space out front of our bar to allow customers to come in and serve them, and Red Brick Foundation stepping up and paying for the first few months of the barriers that they're out there. We recently received a letter saying that this time is up, it's time to move the barriers. And I'm here again with my hand out, asking please, just a little bit longer. I'm hoping for 4 more months. And the reason being is this, and we don't even want the whole space. Currently, I think I sent some pictures over to Jay. We have 2 parking spaces, a loading station, and then another parking space that has that up there. And after speaking to a few council members, I'm getting the vibe that the major concern is the lack of parking space. So if we can find that, the 2 end spaces, which actually are in front of Grace O'Malley's, at the far end of that picture there's 2 parking spaces in front of that establishment that we can get rid of and use just this space that you see here in the front, which is directly in front of our bar, and the loading station next to it would be adequate enough for what we're trying to do. And the reason being is being forced to close for 11 months, we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars revenue. And with this space here, it immediately increased our total occupancy 50%. And over the time that was there, sometime 1 month it exceeded 20%, but averaged around 19% increase in revenues and sales. And we're still trying to make that back. We're far from it, but the reason I'm asking for 4 months is after speaking with a few members and getting the feedback from them as far as what the issues were. The number 1 was the parking spaces. Number 2 was they're really ugly. That is just an eyesore. So I called around and looked at some places from options, everything from concrete barriers, which I got some negative feedback on that as well, to have them come and dropped off, explored having them painted, murals, coverings. Also talked to our police chief, and he mentioned a few other things. After going back and forth with all this, what I'm proposing is there's some ideas coming out with a parklet situation that may be coming in the future. So if we can get this extension for 4 more months in that smaller space there, with those barriers in mind, In the meantime, all open ears to decorate it any way we can. I'm willing to work with everybody here in the council as much as possible, jump in head first and lead the way on this parklet situation. Solve what we want it to look like, whatever materials that we want out there, how we want it decorated, how we want it to look. And we'll be the guinea pig. We'll spend the money on helping getting it out there to show and mess with it, change it around, see it around. And I think we can get that done in 4 months, at least to come up with a better idea or solution that maybe everybody can agree on to make that space better, more attractive. Another reason I wanted to throw out there really quick, which I don't know, I would love to see all of your faces in our bar, and I'd love to buy you all an old fashioned. But I don't expect that. I understand. So I asked our neighbors here, and I did hear that there was some negative feedback there. And I went around and knocked on all our neighbors' doors and asked. And to my face, I got nothing but positive results. They all said the space is great. They've all noticed that with this out there, we've had live music out there on weekends, and it generates a lot of foot traffic and excitement and energy in the area that Grace O'Malley's, the owner of Grace O'Malley's, wrote up a nice little letter that I can share with you guys to say that he's willing to give more spaces to them if it can keep that energy up. And the businesses that are next to us on the other side said they'd be willing to give up the space at night too. Some of them need them for daytime parking. Is that time? Sorry. I'm going to pass it off to my partner then, Brandon.
There's a tag team.
Unless you want to concede it to
Mr. Mills.
I mean, if I'm able to concede my time to Mr. Klein, I'd like to do that if that's possible. Or I can take it. Obviously, we're working this system here. So I'll take it. That'll be good. My name is Brandon Mills. Again, partners with Bob Klein. Obviously sticking with the, and I'm at 1203 Overwood Drive in Matthews, obviously sticking with the barrier/fencing conversation tonight. One of the things that, we had talked about as well is we had even talked about pitching in to do, an extension of the sidewalk, our sidewalk. I don't know if you can really see it from this picture. The rest of the sidewalks you can see, particularly where those gold stanchions are. You can see our sidewalk here actually has those bushes there, which actually shortens our sidewalk, running into some ADA compliance issues, some things that Mr. Urban and I have talked about before. About using sidewalk space. I know, Ms. Gardner, you had talked to us a little bit about the crowding on the sidewalks and all of that, and that, all of those things are very big issues for us. So from the operations side, I definitely wanted to say that, we are committed to clearing that space out. We understand that it's a safety issue. It's a safety issue for us too. Bicycles come down through there, and, we don't want somebody walking out with a $14 cocktail and getting clocked by a bicyclist either. So we're working to keep those things out. We've actually got a couple ideas on how to move that along. But we just wanted to say that, we are completely and 100% committed to something that's aesthetic. We understand that, the look of what it is right now is not what we want to represent in the town that we live in either. We were talking to Chief Pennington about putting some bollards out, even if they're the ones that have, some solar panels and some lights and all of those things. But, obviously, first and foremost, we need to make sure that there's a safety standard to it. But most importantly, we want to commit to you. That's why we're both here tonight talking on the same issue. We are absolutely committed to being financially involved, doing what we need to do in order to make our space look good and be a benefit for us. The 11 months that we were closed was just absolutely detrimental. And this outdoor space has been a huge boon for us within our business as we try to just honestly get back to zero. At this point, we're just fighting to get to zero. Any help that the group here can provide would be absolutely amazing. The things that you have done for us so far has been just beyond phenomenal. And honestly, it's the whole reason why we're still here. We are very glad to be a part of Matthews, and we would love to be a shining example for what we can do in the future. And again, just really wanted to make sure that you understand that as owners, we are absolutely committed to the town and doing things the right way. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Lori, that was the last of our public speakers, correct?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll move on to agenda item number 7. I'll entertain a motion to recess a regular meeting for public hearing on fiscal year 2021-22 budget, CIP, and fee schedule.
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner McCool. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. We now stand recessed for our public hearing. Mr. Blodgett.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, we're going to go over the presentation. Okay, are we okay? All right, so we're talking about the fiscal year 22 budget, which will start July 1st of this year. And we call that the 21-22 budget. So just to do a brief recap of the 2021 budget, our 2021 budget that we are still in for another 2 weeks, basically, we kept the property tax rate at 28 cents. And our general fund balance, which is really our savings account, exceeded 34%. And that is a good, strong number. 32% represents 4 months of our total budget and savings. It's kind of your rainy day fund, and that's very healthy. The other thing we didn't do in this budget, which is a good thing, is we didn't appropriate any fund balance. Some communities do that. So you're reappropriating your savings account, a little bit of your savings account every year. It's generally not a great practice to do. We did reduce our revenue projections due to COVID, both in the general fund and the tourism. There was some impact, not in sales tax, but there was some impact, but we did take a very conservative approach. And then we did see some CARES Act funding that was federal dollars to for the town to offset some of our expenses with COVID. And then there's some other expenses related to COVID that we're going to apply for FEMA for reimbursement of. In the 21-22 budget, which will begin in 2 weeks, we're expected continued recovery in revenues, particularly related to sales tax. And then we are proposing 7 new positions, and we're proposing increasing taxes by 1.5 pennies to 29.5 cents per $100 valuation. All right, so here's a little history. Jay, is there any way we can show the entire, okay, well, that does show the entire thing. Okay, good. So right now our tax rate is, well, the proposed tax rate, excuse me, for 22 is 29.5 cents. It's okay. So we are in this budget that we're talking about tonight, we're proposing 29.5 cents. And then we've gone back 10 years, kind of look at the what's happened to the tax rate. It's gone up and down as a result of revals that we've had since 2011. All right. So in the 21-22 budget, which is the top item there, we are showing a basically $26.5 million budget. That is down from the way the budget ended this year. So what's operating in the budget this year is, I would say, artificially inflated because we had some one-time expenditures. We bought 3 pieces of property. We did some COVID-related things. And so it is really what I would say is artificially one-time increased. And then if you look at the original budget, that's what we started last year at the time, and then we've made some amendments through the year. All right. Okay, so the way the fiscal year 22 budget is, our revenue sources, 59% comes from property tax, 16% comes from sales tax. State shared revenues is about 12%, and then all of our other revenues are 13%. Powell bill, that's a term for the money we get for roads, repaved roads in our town. Okay, so some of the things are putting pressure on this year's budget. The state retirement contribution, that's a money that the town puts to employees' retirement. Employees are also put 6% of their salary in there. That's an increase of $173,000, and then solid waste fees are going up almost $64,000. So there's 2 examples of pressure that's being put on the budget. Some of the other things in the budget, we are investing in our people. We are recommending a 3% merit pool for all employees that meet expectations or exceed or above. And then we're proposing 7 new positions. 4 of them are in the police department, patrol officers with cars, a deputy fire chief with a car, a facilities maintenance technician. They're in charge of the buildings, and then another landscape maintenance worker. Besides those 7 people, we are proposing adding a contracted crime scene technician. Right now we have to use experts out of Charlotte, and we'd like to contract to have our own technician in order to save us some time. And then we want to reclassification of telecommunicator positions. That's about a $25,000 cost. It's not a bunch of money, but we found we're losing telecommunicators to other communities like Union County for as little as a quarter an hour, and we'd like to retain. It's a stressful job. We'd like to retain those good qualified people. All right, then to talk about the individual budgets. So under the governing board, that personnel is flat. Well, I guess it's gone up about $3,000 from the amended budget. In fact, we told the board we were going to make a change, but that if you look in the amended budget, right there in the middle of that slide, it says $597,000. That should not be there. That is purchase of property. So it's a very unusual. So the operating expenses are about flat there. And so it's a relatively flat budget. Okay, under the manager's budget, the operating budget, oh, that's the CARES Act funding. Okay, so the operating budget went up about $184,000. That's one-time CARES Act funding. Then we want to continue the digital newsletter, and then continued training for staff. HR. We have an expanded EAP program for first responders. We found police, fire, and public works have gone through a lot of stress this last year. EAP, Employee Assistance Program. We've expanded this year. We want to continue expanding. So police and fire, if they have some of these whatever very stressful things that can happen to them, that they get real time with a counselor, and it's just not kind of checking the box in a 15-minute conversation that somebody says I'm good. The other thing we're trying to do is we're proposing $31,000 for what we're calling targeted job advertising. One of the things we're very interested in is casting a wider net. In fact, at 5 o'clock today, we talked about the town and our hiring practices and how diversified the town is. In some ways, we're doing a good job. And in other ways, we feel like we can do a better job. And so we really want to make sure we hire the best people possible. I also think that the world is getting more diversified. Our town is getting more diversified, and it's healthy for the town to reflect our community. And so that's one of our intentions. And then we're funding a risk management system. We only have 2 people in HR. They're very hard. They're overworked. And we're hoping this is going to be more efficient and can save some time. Finance is, they have 3 people in finance. We do get GFOA is Government Finance Officers Association. We have gotten a financial reporting award for 22 consecutive years. We want to make sure we continue that. And then we are very proud of our fund balance, which is at 36%, and our unassigned, which is totally, I guess, free money. That's not the word. It's unencumbered. So that's a good sign. It does show the town's in good financial condition. Information technology, it's a flat budget. And the big thing is malware. Our IT person sends out sneaky emails on a regular basis trying to trip us up and really keep us on our toes. This is very, very important, and we've all seen Colonial Pipeline, or kind of name the organization. Okay, safety and risk management. Our property and casualty insurance increase are offset by the reduction in the workers' comp premiums. And then we've contracted our assistance for safety compliance. We want to make sure our employees stay safe. Police, we talked about the 4 officers that we're proposing in here. We're also proposing 10 new vehicles. 3 of them were funded a couple months ago. There is a shortage of microprocessors, so we wanted to make sure we got our order in quickly for the police vehicles. We should be going to 10 vehicles every year. We're going to be recommending that going forward. We have gone to SUVs now, but before the SUVs, we had the Dodge Chargers, and they're simply not holding up to the wear and tear of police service. Mentioned the crime scene technician. You can go to fire, Jay. So the big ask in here is we're continuing to support the Idlewild Volunteer Fire Department. And of course, we do have a combination department, so there's volunteers that do receive incentives in Matthews. The department has 26 paid people and 80 people total, if you include volunteers and our fire volunteers. And we have a chief and captains. Very, very flat organization. We need a deputy chief just based on the amount of span of control, really simply put. So we're recommending that. Public Works, we've recommended 2 positions in Public Works, a facility maintenance technician. This building's 20 years old. Public Works is 20 plus years old. The community center is around 20 years old. The police department, we retrofitted that somewhere around 20 years ago. And we are really having to spend more time on routine maintenance. We have 2 people right now. This would add a 3rd. And then landscaping, we've added a greenway, which we're very proud of, the Crestdale Heritage Trail. We added some pots, hanging baskets along South Trade Street. Those things need to be, unless it rains, they need to be watered every 2 days. We are proposing continuing paving contract for $800,000, but that is low. Consultants are recommending that should be higher over time. We would like to see that probably $500,000 more than it is today. Then we have, we're going to get an asset management system really to track a lot of these to-dos to make sure we are staying on track. We're doing preventive maintenance properly. And then we did increase the vehicle maintenance budget $23,000 because the Dodge Chargers are simply wearing out, and we cannot afford to replace. I think we have 40 of them. We got a lot of Dodge Chargers. Okay. Public Works stormwater, that is fee-based, so that is 100%. Everyone sees that on their tax bills, and that's where the other half of this asset management software is being paid for. Sanitation, we contract out with Republic. It's going up it's tied to the consumer price index. It's going up $63,000. That's about a $2 million budget. That represents about 4 pennies on our tax rate. Some communities in Mecklenburg County, a vast majority of communities across the state of North Carolina charge a separate solid waste fee. We do not do that. It's embedded in the tax rate, but up in Davidson, they have a separate solid waste fee that is 100% of the cost. If we did that, it would be about a $200 bill on all residential. That's all we do. We pick up just residential. We don't do commercial individuals. Every residence in town would have about a $200 fee if we paid 100% of this cost, but instead it's just captured in the tax rate. All right, planning and development, a flat budget. They reduce their operating expenditures due to contract services that they're no longer needed. Okay. And then economic development, that has gone, well, that amended budget's a one-time purchase of property. That's where we're funneling the CARES Act funds out of. That's what it is. That's not the one, that is CARES Act money. That is not, and that's what we distributed to nonprofits around Matthews. We're the only town in Mecklenburg County to utilize this money. We're very proud of that fact. And then there's funding for Red Brick partnership to ongoing, and then we do have money for the Facade grant program. All right, Parks and Rec. We are doing some ADA improvements down at the community center in the bathroom. We have some playground equipment that's old, needs to be replaced. One of the swing sets is not in operation. And we have a shade structure for Rice Road Park. Not a lot of tree canopy out there on Rice Road. All right, some of the other groups that we give funds to is the Levine Senior Center. That's $5,000. We've been giving them $5,000 for a long time. The reason it was reduced last year is because they resurfaced we helped pay for the resurface of the wood floors and took it out of last year's or this year's appropriation. So next year they're back up to $5,000. The tourism grants, that should be, tourism grants should be higher. I think we talked about not reducing it, so that will be different from that. Matthews Alive is still at 60, and then the Arts and Science Council is also at 32. So you will see that in your budget. It's just not here in this presentation. And the 32 represents $1 per capita with what the Arts and Science Council has requested all the towns to do. We've given the Matthews Historical Foundation about $40,000 for a number of years now. And then we have a tourism agreement with the Chamber for $15,000. They do the Welcome Center. All right, so capital, what's it going on in our CIP, capital improvement plan? So we have $134,000 to make some widening improvements of Ames Street. 20 of that is coming from us and from our general fund, and $105,000 is community development block grant, CDBG. $15,000 to replace our automatic defibrillators. We got $30,000 from microwave dish that acts as a backup to the fiber that the big, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but by the police department, there was a very large antenna for our communications. We're Irwin's Creek Greenway, which is over there by Crown Point Elementary, and will connect to the park over there, Idlewild Road Park. So that's a partial payment for that construction of that greenway. We're partnering with the county. And then we're also proposing upgrades to our HVAC systems throughout the town. We have a number of units that are more than 20 years old, and we need to fix them prior to failure.
Is that why we're at 80 degrees right now?
I don't know why that's true. All right, so in our tourism fund, we're continuing to make payments for the community center roof that we did probably about 4 years ago. Debt service on the downtown street replacement. We got rid of the old bulbs and have much nicer decorative lighting down there. $138,000 for the paving out of Matthews Station Street. And then $135,000 for the Matthews downtown, really to improve on the Crestdale Heritage Trail and tie the downtown to the Sportsplex so that folks can get around town. And then $112,000 for the improvement to Uten Pottery. Needs to be funded over 3 years. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so does anybody want to speak in favor or against the budget or have any questions? please come to the podium. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Ginger Monette. I'm at 2508 Fitzpatrick Lane in Matthews. And my question is, you mentioned $31,000 for, basically it sounded to me like advertising for positions. My question is, what % of the total salaries does that represent? For example, if the total salaries combined of the positions you're hiring for is $100,000, then $31,000 represents 30% of the entire cost of the salaries. I have no idea. That's why I'm asking. That sounds extremely high when you can use, and now if you're going to hire like a recruiter or someone like that, but I'm looking at the positions that you were looking at hiring for, and they didn't seem to require some sort of special $30,000 worth of funding to hire when you can put it on Indeed.com and get, resumes from all over the country for $20.
So those positions we did show, we will use some of that $31,000, but the intention is, we have, as you can imagine, we have vacancies in police probably continually. I don't know, is it full staff right now? Okay. Do you know how many vacancies? We got one vacancy. That's pretty good. So, but what we're really trying to do when we're not going to use this until we have vacant positions to fill, but our intention is to cast a wider net. We're worried that we're just getting a segmented portion of the population, and we'd like to see a diversified applicant pool, and that's that $31,000 is intentional to try to widen and diversify our applicant pool so we just don't get a homogenous group of folks.
So how does spending $31,000, like who would you, through what vehicle?
Yeah.
Through a recruiter?
So what's our targeted audiences?
But I mean, does Indeed.com does exactly that, does it not?
I don't think so.
So what was the thought behind the amount for $31,000? Was that a recruiter or?
Can we pull it up? Can anybody pull it up? We have the list.
By the way, I really appreciate your presentation, and I think the town of Matthews has done an outstanding job of creating a very pleasant place to live. Things like Matthews Alive, which I don't attend, but just as the gentleman that owned the bar, I was downtown for the first time in the evening, and he was exactly right. The energy downtown, lots of people around. I'm very impressed. Just the whole look of downtown Matthews is very nice. I've been very pleased with our police and fire. So thank you all for your hard work in the parks that we have and the greenways.
Thank you for those nice comments. So we're coming to, okay, there it is. So it says advertising. So some of these, like Q City Metro, it's a predominantly Black and African-American readership. We would post all our openings there, and we're estimating it would cost $5,100. Asian American, that's a Chamber of Commerce, that's free. Hispanic League is $500 a year. Minority Government Jobs.com is $3,400. Diversified.com, select senior level positions, that's $6,800 a year. So it's intentional to, I guess I've said it a couple times now, but we want to get the best people possible and make sure our applicant pool is as diversified as possible as well.
I understand, and I can appreciate that. However, I would say that I would think that most of us, if we were hiring someone and we even had the same intention, yes, maybe you can reach a tad further that's a ton of extra money. That's a lot of $6,000, $5,000. When I see Indeed, it says, what does it say? Scrapes our postings from other sites. I mean, from my experience hiring through Indeed.com, you put it out there and you put in the parameters that you want, and you can have as many gazillion, you can have people, contact you from New York that want to move here, with any demographic that you choose. So I'm just saying that I think most of us, if this was our business, we would not spend $30,000 for something that we could basically accomplish something almost extremely similar for probably less than $1,000. Thank you.
Charlie, you have a comment?
Just one brief comment. I just wanted to say that in terms of what most of us would do, there's a big difference between public employment and private employment. And the public employment has to be within constitutional and statutory guidelines so that we do not in any way, shape, or form create a violation of rights. And you can do that a little more in the private, but you can't do it in the public. And so in order to reach the diversity needs, we need to get the word out to all of the different organizations that can help supply the personnel pool to interview. And so there's a big difference in the constitutional and statutory needs all based on public employment that you're not running into altogether with private employment.
I understand. I have to say I would still disagree. That amount of money seems enormous to accomplish such a relatively simple, again, I would do that's why you guys are the elected officials and I'm not.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody else care to speak in favor or against or have a question? Please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Fred Reel. I live at 627 Winterwood Drive in Matthews. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. First, let me thank you all for the informative discussions that I've heard over the past month at the budget visioning session and budget workshops. I appreciate the healthy debate and proposals from you all, and I also appreciate the information town staff has been able to provide in answering my questions promptly. Having said that, I am still disappointed that we're talking today about a 1.5 cent tax increase, which for the record, I do not support and ask you to vote against. As it stands today, Matthews will be the only municipality within Mecklenburg County that is imposing a tax increase to its residents. To be clear, the towns of Mint Hill, Pineville, Huntersville, Davidson, and Cornelius are all proposing no tax increase to its residents. The city of Charlotte is proposing no tax increase to its residents, and Mecklenburg County is also proposing no tax increase to its residents. But the town of Matthews' current budget proposes a 5.4% tax increase, which I find unacceptable, particularly during a time when our neighbors, residents, and even some members in this very room you are sitting in today are struggling. I remain hopeful that this board can come to a compromise on how to present a balanced budget without increasing taxes, as all the surrounding municipalities managed to do within this county, and would like to share some points with you tonight. How the town is receiving $9.7 million in ARPA funds that can't be deployed now is upsetting. And I recognize the red tape extends beyond anyone in this room. But when the whole purpose of a relief bill is to provide immediate recovery to the taxpayers, and that can't happen, it's really not only shameful, but an insult to the very people that have been doing all they can to remain afloat. But there are other items this board can control, and I believe a closer look needs to be taken at some of the larger capital improvement projects that are being funded through this general fund, which is part of this year's tax rate. And to put that in perspective, while $754,100 is currently being set aside from the general fund to fund CIP, there is a projected $1,068,333 being listed as being funded from the general fund to fund CIP next year. All the while, interest rates are at record lows and debt service accounts for merely 4% of the overall tax rate. And really, when you look at the $762,000 that is being sought in the 1.5 cent tax increase, nearly half of that increase can be offset by the planned HVAC replacement, currently listed at $395,000, for which $325,000 is being funded through the current year tax rate or general fund. And I want to be clear, I'm not asking this board to not make necessary replacements to the HVAC systems that are in disrepair, but rather seek and secure 5-year financing for this project, similar to other projects, such as 2 5-year notes for engines 1 and 2, or the notes that we have on the Levine Senior Center, which are all scheduled to be fully paid and fall off the town's debt service in FY22 and FY23. By spreading costs over the next 5 years, versus having our residents provide immediate financing for this project through the general fund, we can eliminate nearly half of the proposed tax increase. And it makes sense logically because residents today should not be providing immediate funding for a capital improvement project that may well extend beyond 10, 15, or even 20 years. When you purchase any fixed asset or capital improvement, it gets capitalized or added to your balance sheet and depreciated over its useful life. You don't just expense it all in the period you purchase it because it provides a longer-term benefit. And in effect, through funding the $325,000 through the general fund, that's exactly what we're doing. And it's one of the reasons why I ask you not to support this budget or a property tax increase. Finally, looking beyond the current year, it seems every year the discussion gets brought up on putting out a bond referendum to fund some larger projects, particularly concerning public safety. I've heard of SCBA replacements, an emergency operations center, fire station number 3, additional firefighters, fire trucks, more needed police officers, police replacement vehicles, and even a build out of a potential public safety training center. So the list is really endless. But coincidentally, when you get to the time of discussing the budget, we're too close to the November election to get it on the ballot. And I'd ask our leaders to step away from this circular reference and get serious about looking closer at what we can put together in a public safety bond package to also provide relief to the taxpayers. It not only makes sense accounting-wise, but it will put the onus on staff to get started on a bond or financing package, which has been discussed for the last 3 years now. And it ultimately leaves the decision to the residents who would vote in favor or against such a proposal through the referendum. Thank you for your time and service to this wonderful town.
Thank you, Mr. Reel. We appreciate your very detailed comments every year. You probably do more than any other citizen in our town to keep us on our toes, so thank you, sir. Are there any other comments or questions regarding the budget? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to reconvene to our regular meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Do we have a second? Second from Commissioner McCool. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. We'll move on to agenda item 9, planning and development business. I'd like to ask Jay Camp to introduce our planning board members in attendance, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry for the pause there. And I'm not sure who's here virtually and in person, so I'm just going to read out our planning board
That'd be great.
committee. Our chair, Mike Foster, of course, is here. Vice Chair Natasha Edwards, Jonathan Clayton, Tom Dorsey, Jim Johnson, Carrie Lamson, Mike Rowan, Sarah Walker, Howie Labner, and our youth voice members, Prayag Patel and Miranda Stujanki. And while I have the mic, I just want to do a quick plug. You know, things keep moving along with the Silver Line. On Tuesday, June 22nd, CATS will be hosting at 5:30. CATS will be hosting a virtual community meeting, which is the kickoff for the TOD study. That stands for Transit Oriented Development. So that is an ongoing study that's parallel to the design work, and it's going to give us better ideas for how the new developments around the transit stations will look and feel. So there will be some additional, more in-depth meetings that will be specific to Matthews, so this is corridor-wide. But if anyone's interested, we'll make sure we get that information on social media on the town website. So, thank you.
Thank you for that plug and also for telling us what TOD stands for. I know in the transit game, there's like 8 million different acronyms, so they get confusing sometimes. Let's go to 9A, receive a report from Planning Board Chair Mike Foster.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Board of Commissioners. I have our Planning Board report from our May 25th, 2021 meeting. We have 3 items for your consideration tonight. Item number 1, text amendment, motion 2021-1, United Development Ordinance, UDO, text change regarding fence height. Members of the Planning Board reviewed the amended text that would allow 6-foot fences in the front setback of residentially owned properties that front 4 or more major lanes of traffic along Pineville Matthews Road, Matthews Township Parkway, and Matthews Mint Hill Road. Members discussed the failed request for a variance from the Board of Adjustment for citizens residing in the RVS zone, Meadows at Matthews neighborhood. In a vote 5-2, the planning board members recommended that motion 2021-1 be denied as submitted. The request was found to be inconsistent with the Matthews land use plan because it selectively gives the right to allow a 6-foot fence within the front setback on some property, but not others. The rezoning request was found to be unreasonable because it only applies to one thoroughfare corridor in the town. Mr. Camp said after discussion of the RVS zoning district issue, this was first brought up by board member Jim Johnson, that there could be some flex design standards for fences and walls that could be applied to this situation. Mr. Camp said there may be another option for the proposed text amendment, and he would research further. Jay, I don't know if you want to mention that now or if you want to bring it up during the board discussion. Okay, all right. Okay, item number 2, administrative amendment for Windsor Square, 10101 East Independence Boulevard, modification to the facade at the former Jcpenney store. Members voted unanimously to recommend approval for the request to modify the facade and allow a curb cut for store customer pickups at the former location for the Jcpenney store. This would be to accommodate the new at-home tenant in the Windsor Square Shopping Center. The request was found to be consistent with the Matthews land use plan because it promotes a non-residential destination-based land uses along US 74. The request was found to be reasonable and that the proposed zoning changes do not significantly impact the intent of the original rezoning. Item number 3, public improvement variance, Walking by Faith Community Church, 2105 Rice Road. Walking by Faith Community Church was requesting the delay of installing curb gutter and pavement widening before the issuance of building permits for phase 2 of their construction. The request was an extension to the approved 2015 public improvements that waived the installation requirement of paving and curb and gutter along Sam Newell Road and delayed the right-of-way improvements along Sam Newell Road and parts of Rice Road. Sidewalks were still required along the length of the property along Sam Newell. Members of the planning board unanimously agreed to recommend approval of the request to delay installation of the curb, gutter, and pavement widening before the issuance of building permits for phase 2 construction as currently submitted. It's also recommended that sidewalk on Rice Road be extended to the limits of the 2015 public improvements variance. Other items for town board information, planning board training. Members of the planning board have been offered an opportunity to participate in on-demand training that is being offered by the UNC School of Government. That's greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Small area plan. Planning staff have begun working on a new small area plan along the intersection of I-45 and Idlewild Road. Planning board members were asked if there was any interest to participate in conversations and the public meetings. And last item, future planning board meetings. Matthews planning board meetings will continue to be held virtually at this time. Members will be polled again on the comfort level of returning to in-person meetings in the near future. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Foster? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to 9B1, motion 2021-1 text amendment. A text amendment to the UDO to allow a 6-foot fence in the front yard setback along major thoroughfares with proper setbacks and vegetative screening. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. It's good to be back in person. As the mayor mentioned, this is a UDO text amendment to allow 6-foot fence in the front yard setback along major thoroughfares with proper setbacks and vegetative screening. Staff was directed by the Board of Commissioners to look at the possibility to allow fences higher than 4 feet in the front yard setback along major roadway corridors in the town to give those residents some relief from traffic noise and increase in privacy. After holding the public hearing, and having discussions with a number of staff members, the initial proposed language was found to be that we had too large of a setback. Materials lists for fence construction should be provided. Maybe allow different types of landscaping in front of the fence, the 6-foot fence. Number of lanes of the thoroughfares should be considered. Originally, we had proposed a number of major thoroughfares, but the number of applicable roads was suggested those should be limited further, and additional setback for driveways for gates in driveways so that we have proper amount of space for queuing of vehicles. As Mr. Foster mentioned, after lengthy discussion, the planning board voted to recommend denial of the proposed text amendment. Some of the concerns raised at the planning board include the potential of a degradation of aesthetics of the proposed corridor, which is Highway 51. Changing the text of the UDO should not be done to benefit a few properties, but the entire town in itself. And the planning board really wanted a process that would give more control to the town, at the same time rectify property owners' issues. Based on issues brought up at public hearing and discussions with staff, the current proposed text amendment as written changed the reduction of the fence setback from the right-of-way from 15 feet to 8 feet. 8 feet is the size of a current planting strip. We felt that was adequate. It limited the application of 6-foot fences to be allowed in front yards along Pineville Matthews Road, Matthews Township Parkway, Matthews Mint Hill Road, which is Highway 51, of course, with 4 or more lanes of traffic instead of all major thoroughfares, which was the original proposal. They added the language to include walls because this section of the UDO includes fences and walls. We added a 20-foot setback for gates and driveways. We specifically require the fence or wall to be made of wood or brick. No changes were made in the landscaping requirement for evergreens to be spaced every 5 feet in front of the fence. And then last but not least, we added the requirement for a no-charge permit to be required from the planning department to ensure compliance. At this time, the text is in your packet and is also displayed on the screen. At this time, staff recommends approval of the following text. If that's the direction that the board wants to take, staff feels that it's sufficiently tailored to resolve certain property owners' issues that front Pineville Matthews Road. In a quick analysis, I roughly counted about 32 residential properties that would be impacted by this change, 7 of which are in the Meadows neighborhood. But the majority of this corridor, the houses are really, they do not front the 4-lane highway, they front side streets, and as you know, we have a lot of commercial activity, which this would not apply to commercial zoned properties. That is my staff report right now, but happy to answer any questions or talk about some more of the concerns of the planning board or any concerns that the board may have.
Rob, Mr. Foster mentioned there may be another remedy, Jay, that you brought up. Can you maybe explain that?
I just want to thank Rob for giving a very difficult task to try to draft some of this text in response to some of these particular situations on 51. As mentioned by Planning Chair Mr. Foster, comments were made at Planning Board that there potentially was a more focused solution here, and that would be the use of the town's flexible design standards that are part of our zoning process. It's frankly not, in my time here, I haven't seen us utilize it because it does list fences and walls, specifically height, as items that can be modified or potentially increased as part of a rezoning. So your board does have two options tonight. One would be to approve the text as currently drafted, and what Mr. Will's statement was essentially that we're comfortable with this text if you want to move forward with it. However, as an option B, I would say the applicant or the property owners could submit a rezoning application and make a change of conditions to the zoning for Meadows at Matthews, and make a flexible design standards request as a part of that.
Jay, do I understand that that would require unanimous support of all 7 homeowners? Is that correct?
As I understand it. And I haven't had a chance to speak with Mr. Buckley about it. We do have an administrative amendment process. I'm not sure if that would be applicable to our administrative amendment process, but we could certainly look into that as well.
Anybody have any questions, comments? Commissioner McCool?
I guess my question, I know this is we're talking about a text amendment, but the specifics of these 7 homes, can you walk me through why they were zoned the way they were to where their technical front yard is their actual back? Why their backyard is their front yard and vice versa?
Absolutely, and I apologize. I don't think we don't have a map or Polaris image. You know, I was still full hybrid. Or a full remote. Just pull it up really quick. These lots, when the property originally went through zoning, of course it was 1 lot subdivided into 7. Through a rezoning process, there was a legal requirement to have street frontage on a public street. So that public street in any lot in Matthews, that is your front setback. So you have to meet the standards for fences and walls, the setback of the home, etc. Their access is a shared driveway along the back of the properties. That was the developer's creative solution to avoid having 7 driveways on 51, which I don't think any of us would have wanted to see from a safety and access control perspective. So it's a little bit unique.
I guess a follow-up, are there any other neighborhoods or small communities that have this similar situation that this might come back up for a discussion in the future if someone has a similar issue?
We have 1 or 2. I think we have 1 development on Idlewild Road, which is utilizing it's a little bit different layout, but they're utilizing a private drive for about 10 houses. It's up near Idlewild Road Park. So there could potentially be a desire to provide screening to the homes because they will likely face Idlewild Road.
Thank you.
Commissioner Miller?
Thank you. I support the text that's in red and underlined here. I think it's a good compromise. It's restrictive enough to where it wouldn't affect the whole town or some of the other examples that people were afraid of. And other than reading off why, I just see the logic in this. I really do, for all the reasons that have been stated. And I would remind this board that one of our goals or our mission statements is to maintain a small town feel. And I think to deny it is I don't know, I think it's okay that we treat this on an individual basis, in my opinion. And I would want us to support this as written in the red underline.
Commissioner Urban?
So, Rob, talk to me about the other 25. Are they in clusters of 2 or 3? What of the 32 incidences, where are they in a proximity to this? And I mean, because what you've done is you've narrowed down the text to Highway 51, basically.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's good. That's a good start. I can see where Commissioner Monroe's going, but talk to me about the 32.
Okay. So the 32, they are not all clumped together. They are houses that are on somewhat, I'll say medium-sized lots, medium to large lots, have driveway frontage along Highway 51, And honestly, they're probably in groups of 2 or 3s it is spread out throughout the corridor, with the exception of course, in the commercial area, there are none. But it seems as though in looking at those properties, as I mentioned before, they're larger lots than the seven clusters, and the houses are set back fairly substantially from Highway 51 as well, from in the 32.
But because those lots are larger, potentially one house of the 32 could equal 3 or 4 houses of the 7, right, in frontage?
I'd say 2 or 3.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I don't have a problem in high level text. I have a problem in not being a little bit more specific with the construction of the word or brick. In my opinion, if there could be 2 options of fence or 3 options of fence or brick, that would create a level of consistency. Someone going down 51 is going to see a pattern, and it's just not 32 different arrangements. We worked really, really hard to keep that a residential corridor, landscaped, et cetera. That would just add more visual clutter if everybody could do something different. Now, a wood fence stylistically doesn't change price too much from a type A to a type C, D, or E, or F, but my opinion would be some level of standardization that would preclude making it chaotic. That's all my point would be.
Commissioner Miller.
One item that I forgot to mention, I drove to Pineville today and I studied the corridor. The new developments are installing berms and landscaping, and some of the older ones, like I think it's Settlers Landing, has a 6-foot wooden privacy fence along there, and frankly, the right-of-way is ugly, darn ugly. So just a 6-foot wood privacy fence would probably be good enough. I don't know why we wouldn't, I like the aluminum, powder-coated aluminum fences, but that's not going to give you the privacy. That's just going to give you a barrier. But Settlers Landing already has a 6-foot privacy fence set back.
Just for clarification, Settlers Landing is in Charlotte, not in Matthews.
That's fine,
Okay.
but it's a stone's throw further.
Jay, do you or Rob, do you guys necessarily see any difficulty in the option B, flexible design standards route? I personally like that a little better because it would limit this action to these 7 clustered houses and we wouldn't have to worry about the rest of it. Is that, how probable is that to be an effective solution? I guess, first of all, it would require all 7 homeowners to agree to it, correct?
It would, and it would go through process that is the change of conditions in the zoning district. So it would require community meeting and all of the things that, because it's a conditional zoning district, the RVS where they are. So it would take a little bit more time, a couple months, 3 months, further down the road.
Mr. Manager, you and I spoke earlier today. Could the town consider waiving the rezoning fee if we did this?
We have done it before. We think it's going to be between $1,000, or normally be about $1,000. $800 to $1,000. So we could waive that. I think the question is, can they get seven signatures? But we could delay this for 30 days. You could table this for 30 days to see if that's possible. It sure would be if there's any other direction the board. If that's not possible, so one of the 7 could say, I'm not doing it. It sure would be nice to say, okay, if that's not possible, what does the board want as staff? So we're not like back here again, right? Like trying to figure out where we want to head with this.
That would be my preference. Maybe defer this decision and also defer the compliance issue with the non-compliant fence. I mean, I don't know what others think. Do you guys go for that?
I guess I have a question, and maybe I'm wrong with this, but the gentleman who spoke earlier, his fence is already up, and doesn't he have till end of this month or end of next month? So if we to take it down, so if we delay this a few months, he's gonna have to take down his fence, and then we say, oh, you can have a fence. Could we?
We are good about working, Carlo particularly is very good
Correct.
about working with folks, you know, realizing boards in debate, we're not trying to be punitive to
Oh,
anybody.
yeah, just wanted to make sure.
I just think this would limit everybody's concerns about this going all over town. It would be for these specific 7 residences.
Yeah,
Commissioner Whitley.
my concern is that we've been talking about this now for 2 months, and I know these people, it's not a whole town, as Jeff was saying, it's just isolated. And staff has put together a recommended approval, and to make each one do an individual, and then I know you're talking about waiving some type of fee, but if this was do what we intended them to do, then they can move forward tonight and we could be done with this. And that's, I'm in favor of what the staff has put together here for us to approve, so that these people, these 7 houses can go forth. I know it might have, but it's isolated, and it's not a widespread throughout the town. That's just my opinion.
So Charlie, if we vote on this and it does not pass, then that's the only option they have is the other route, correct? Are there any other comments, questions? Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
We still have one neighborhood resident here. Would it be appropriate to ask your thoughts on that? I mean, I feel like.
Mr. Koenig, do you
No, I'm
think?
not asking for 7, but I would like to. They have been going on with this for an extended period of time. I'm sure it's stressful. And so would you, if it's okay, would you like to speak?
Yeah, so the main point for all of us is to solve our problem. So we obviously care about the town as a whole, and we want to make sure that it looks nice because we are residents of this town. So our main goal is to solve our problem. I would imagine that this process of the flexible design will involve some sort of maps and putting together a lot of documentation. So none of us is familiar with that process, and we are not contractors and builders, so we have no idea how to obtain all that. If it's not a case, we definitely, if it's just signatures from all of us, that should be doable. If it's putting together maps and formal documentation, we might not be able to pull that together quickly.
So Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but so what the staff's looking for is the properly filled out application of 7 signatures. Correct. We would, because it's very straightforward, we would take it from there and waive the fee as well. That's correct. Okay.
So I would say.
Petition, not one petition for 7. Yeah, that's because it's a cluster. It's already an RBS community.
Commissioner Urban.
I mean, I think that in my mind, that's a cleaner, gets us away from the text amendment. If you're working with a contractor for the fence, so to speak, they can help you with illustrations and materials. So like, here's a picture, here's the material finish, stuff like that. So I think you could generate all that very, very easily. And it gets us out of this quandary of the text amendment across the board. So I would be in support of that. So my question would be is, do we actually have to take a motion here, or does Jay just need to sort of start the process with the neighbors? Where do we need to go? Because the motion is on the text amendment. You need to do. So we need to vote up or down and then move on.
But there is some risk there that if it's voted down, then this is the only option they have. But if that doesn't pass, then they're out of luck. Why don't we table it?
Yeah, table it for a while.
Table to see how they move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like you to verify that you can get the unanimous support before we say you absolutely can't do this option. Then you're gonna, if you can't get the unanimous support, then you're not gonna be out of luck.
I agree. If we have an option to postpone the decision, it's better to have that on the side than deny it right now. So, but it's my personal opinion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion, and we table motion 2021-1 And let's give them some extra running room here of 60 days.
Okay, we have a motion to table text amendment 2021-1.
Since you're doing specific, you need the date. We need to see what that date is.
Okay, July 12th.
July 12th.
Yeah. No, 60 days.
Six-
So that would be August meeting. Yeah, August 9th.
So 60 to the August 9th meeting.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Miller.
Why 60, John?
Well, I mean, it's clearly completely new to them. They've got to go back before the other neighbors and coalesce and put some things together. Then there'll be the actual process of them pulling together the paperwork and doing that. So it just, even if they want to come back sooner than that, I suppose they could, but I'm just trying to give them that latitude. They don't feel pressured.
I don't think there's any real urgency on our part to deal with offense. All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Urban, a second from Mayor Pro Tem Garner. Take the vote. All in favor? All opposed? Oh. That passes unanimously with a begrudgingly from Commissioner Miller, but he joined us. So that passes. Thank you, sir. If you need help, speak with Jay, and he'll be glad to help you, I'm sure. Let's move on to the next item, 9B2, Public Improvement Variance, Walking by Faith Community Church, 2105 Rice Road. Mr. Hallman.
Thank you, Mayor. No, it's just a little too small. While he's getting that pulled up, so Walking by Faith Community Church is currently constructing a church at the corner of Rice Road and Samuel Road. The property is zoned R15. The church is being developed by right, so there's no conditional zoning attached to that. It's also being constructed in 2 phases. The church is currently asking for a public improvements variance for a section of Rice Road. This would delay the widening of the roadway and the installation of curb and gutter. Jay, could you go to the... So attachment 1 shows the location. Jay, if you go to the next slide. These photos from Google Maps, they showed the location of Rice Road that the church is asking the public improvements variance for. So it would just be from the edge of their property back up towards Samuel. It wouldn't be the entire section of Samuel where they're asking right now. So the rest of the right-of-way, there was a public improvement variance granted in 2015. And so the curb and gutter and sidewalks had already been delayed until phase 2. Jay, go to the next slide. Just to kind of put everything into perspective. So the blue lines show what's going to be constructed during phase 1. Right now, there is a picnic shelter on site that is part of the phase 1. Additionally, in phase 1 would be a multi-purpose building and parking lot and construction of a new driveway. What they're proposing to do for right-of-way improvements are the sidewalk improvements on Rice Road, highlighted in blue. Everything in red is what they're proposing to put into phase 2. So that would be when the actual main sanctuary goes in and the parking expansion. The sidewalk along Samuel, that was delayed back in 2015. And so was a section of the road widening on, or a section of the sidewalk along Rice Road. And so essentially what they're asking for is they're just asking to install a section of the sidewalk. As indicated, Planning Board had mentioned or had recommended expanding that sidewalk. The church did. They did accept those terms, so they would be expanding the sidewalk out. Jay, if you could go to the next slide. Do we have the pointer? Just out of curiosity. Okay. So just to point out, the section of sidewalk that Planning Board would recommend extending was this area right here. Originally, it had stopped about 10 feet past the driveway or the proposed driveway. And then the church did agree to extend it back to the edge of the original 2015 limit. Jay, if you go to the next slide. Zoom in a little bit. So just to point out what I meant by the 2015 limit. So back in 2015, the board did approve a public improvements variance. That was along Sam Newell, and it was for a section of Rice Road. That section was from an area about 273 feet from the intersection back down Rice Road. And so the sidewalk would stop about 273 feet from the intersection. Yeah, if you could go to the next slide. This is another sheet from that public improvements variance. It just kind of shows the phasing, shows the parking lot expansion. And then if you could go to the last slide too. So staff does have 2 additional recommendations, and Planning Board had noted making the change in the original text, or making the change match up for the original text so that all improvements that are delayed would be constructed before issuing the building permit. After speaking with the church, they did request that we actually moved it until the CO was released for the church. So the roadway improvements would occur while the sanctuary in phase 2 would be under construction rather than before. Again, this would happen in between the multi-purpose building being built and the sanctuary being built later. Additionally, staff is asking that we look for some type of insurities, at least on the sidewalk. So with delaying everything until phase 2, and everything being tied to the sanctuary as the main building, it essentially puts everything in a limbo. So there's no guarantees that any of this would be constructed if the sanctuary is never constructed. And so I think, like, at a minimum, what staff would be looking for would just be making sure that the sidewalk on Rice Road and Sam Newell would be constructed maybe in a period of 5 years from the date of approval of this public improvement variance.
Okay, and is that acceptable to the church?
I believe the pastor is here remotely, and then we do have another representative from the church.
Excuse me, sir, could you come up to the podium so we can hear you? Can you come up to the podium? State your name and address and speak into the microphone so we can all hear you. Thank you.
My name's Norris Shepard with MCT General Contractors. We are the general contractors that have been working with the church for many years on this project. Also have Chris Hope Engineering here, and also have a lot of members of the church here as well. The pastor, I believe, is on Zoom. Is he?
Okay.
Yes, I can. Yes. The church is asking that the road improvements, the widening of the road and the curb and gutter for the area that's already been approved to be done in phase 1, for that to be delayed until phase 2 of the construction. And the biggest reason for that is it's causing a financial hardship on them at this time. Now, I can only think that in terms of putting a sundown clause on this or a time extension, is that that's probably going to put more pressure on the church. You know, their hopes are to move in this area, in this community, and grow. And they're going to be in a multi-purpose building initially, but then their hopes are, as they grow, to be in a position that they can construct the second building, which is a larger sanctuary. So I'm afraid that if you put some kind of time frame or time limit on them, that's going to cause an additional financial hardship on the church. Are there any questions?
Well, I think our concern is that, you know, if the sanctuary is not built for 20 years, we don't want to wait 20 years to have this constructed. So I think there needs to be some sort of sunset on it.
Yeah, well, that is why I'm hoping that you can get in touch with a pastor, because as the contractor and as a designer, we can't answer that question for them.
Understand.
All I can do is give you my own personal thoughts about it.
Well, I think 5 years is fairly reasonable. And then if there was a hardship, the church could always come back to this board and ask for an extension.
Now, in the absence of the pastor, if we can't get him, do we?
This is Pastor Denton, if you can hear me okay.
I think we got it.
Yes, we can hear you.
Pastor.
Great. Good evening, Mayor, to all of our commissioners. Thank you all so much for entertaining our request tonight. Thank you to our contractor, Mr. Shepard, and to our architect as well. Listen, it is at this current time a hardship for us in trying to bring this support to Matthews. We're not even starting with the sanctuary. We're starting with the community outreach center so that we can bring a valuable resource to the community. That is our goal right now. Although that building will be used also to worship, it is truly centered around reaching out to our underprivileged members in the community and to serve as a stopgap, not only between those members that need the help and the agencies, both local and county-wide. To put that building up right now is paramount. We have seen the need for it in the area. We've been working on some satellite areas. This is going to be a great thing, I believe, for Matthews and the surrounding areas. The variance is to allow us to get our feet on the ground, to get moving in the community. The hardship with the curb and gutter and widening of the road right now financially is definitely something that would stop us from doing the mission that we really want to do. Just like so many others tonight, our commitment to Matthews, North Carolina is true. We don't plan to go anywhere. Our desire is to develop this corner of Sam Newell and Rice Road to become an integral part of the community. We have gone through many different phases and we have met just about everything that we've been asked to do, but the curb and gutter and the sidewalk and the road widening is just a lot of money for us at this time. 5 years with the option to appeal, you know, that's fine. My only question to you is what happens in 5 years if we're still growing the ministry? Are we going to have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops in order to get an appeal? Obviously, we're not going anywhere. This decision from me as pastor for this church is based on, number one, there is no foot traffic on Sam Newell at all. That is a very busy road. We would be the only entity that have to deal with a sidewalk on Sam Newell, just dealing with this corner. On Rice Road, bringing that sidewalk from the already established sidewalk to the other side up to that 273 foot would enable us to get the mission started. I don't know how effective, if you will, putting a sundown or a moratorium on being able to actually say we'll be able to do it by then. I was thinking this, we don't have that type of sundown clause on DOT as it relates to Rice Road and Sam Newell. They're going to take Rice Road based on a meeting that we attended in January and move it all the way out to Independence, but we don't know when that's going to happen. They're going to take a part of that property when they do that to put in that traffic light. and whatever other type of improvements that they need to do. What we do on Rice Road right now, as we do this phase one, could all be dug up based on what the county decides to do. So to have us in a dire strait financially, not knowing what the actual outcome of the roadways are going to be, I think for us is a little, it's a little bit out of order. Now that's just Pastor Denson talking, but we will meet every requirement that you have for us. We're just asking you to let us get our feet on the ground to do what God has led our hearts to do. Can you hear me?
Commissioner Miller, do you have a comment, sir?
I have a question. The initial development was approved and a variance given 6 years ago. What has been the delay for the last 6 years from getting started?
The true delay has been, number one, the curb and gutter, the sidewalk. We had initially in 2012, when we started this process, we had about $580,000 that we were prepared to build on the corner of Sam Newell and Rice Road. After going through the processes and finding out what was required, curb and gutter, road widenings on Sam Newell and Rice Road pushed us up an additional $450,000. We have been constantly working toward meeting those dollar figures. We have did exceptionally well, but there is still just a lot of money out there, and that's what's been the holdup for the most part. Even COVID, we were still able to exceed what we did the previous year. So the church is growing slowly, but right now, I hate to use this term, but we're like nomads. We don't have a building that we can, begin to advertise out to the community and let them know where we are. And we're trying to get our feet on our property that we have paid cash for on the corner of Sam Newell and Rice Road. We want to use it for the intended purpose in which we started.
Darren, do you have any feeling for the likelihood of DOT coming in and ripping up whatever they're building or we're asking them to build?
So I think right now that would be hard to determine, especially with everything that's happened with NCDOT's funding pre-COVID. But I would like to note that if we do set at least some type of timeline on the delays, the board always does have the option to revisit that and to re-examine any NCDOT plans.
Commissioner Urban?
In my opinion, we have to set some limitations here, because I was talking to the petitioner earlier before the meeting, and I said, I'm assuming you're going to use the multi-purpose building for your sanctuary space.
That's correct.
And the answer was, well, yes. So in my mind, you're getting full use of the property and are actually gaining advantage over someone else wanting to develop a piece of property, not completing to the rules of regulation. But I'm willing to compromise a little bit. I will tell you the Rice Road extension will punch through. There's development that was approved by this board on the other side, and that's going to happen. And whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, it's going to happen, which is going to generate pedestrian traffic along Rice Road to some of the new housing projects that this board has also approved. And I really honestly feel that it needs to be tied to a time post the CO of phase one. Because if it's time to phase two, to the mayor's point, it could be 20 years from now. And we then fall to be in jeopardy of not having a sidewalk, not having the connectivity that the town has been trying to push through. And the idea of the Rice Road punch through an extension falters because of it. So I'm willing to sort of hear what other board members feel, but I think if they have a sanctuary building built, they are generating through their tithes income, and they can set money away, that several years after the CO of phase one, they should be able to talk about completing the work. Because to be frank and to be fair, what will other zoning petitioners do as well, saying, well, I'll do my road improvements after my CO is done. And I don't think we want to go down that slippery slope, whether it's a church or it's a hospital or it's a private residence or anything like that. We have to be equal in our treatment in these cases.
Commissioner Whitley.
I'm looking at the drawing and I'm talking about Sam Newell now. There is no sidewalk on there. And there is going to be a connection through Rice Road at some point. But how long are we from there as well also? We all know what DOT and where they stands in their projection, and they're cutting back on some different stuff. So I don't have no problem with voting for them to continue to do the multipurpose. In church is a little bit different. It depends on your givability of the people there. Of course, coming out of COVID was not an easy task. And if they had the money to start the building and then to put in curb and gutter, well, cost them is twice as much. And if that word is, and I know this pastor, his word is his bond, that he would put it in at phase two. I'd like to give them opportunity to get started and have somewhere to worship, to draw people in to be able to get there. From what I'm hearing, they do have some money, but with the restriction, certainly when I'm looking at Sam Newell, there's no precedent for that because there's nothing else on there to make them do that, especially if they're not ready to close. From what I'm looking at the picture here now, they're not close to any of those on Sam Newell, but Rice Road, they want to do a frontage as well as that too.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I was under the impression we were going to put in a multi-use path along Sam Newell from Rice Road to Crown Point.
That's correct.
So the sidewalk to me would be redundant as far as Sam Newell is concerned.
I mean, I think we're talking about the sidewalk there on Rice Road, but it's true that right now there's not a sidewalk along Sam Newell, but there is funding in the town's appropriated. It's 20% for share. Now DOT is holding us up, but there is design work that's been done. So it's I would say a matter of time before there's a sidewalk there or multi-use path there on Sam Newell Road.
So do any of the commissioners that haven't yet weighed in have a comment? Anybody? Commissioner McCool?
While I agree with both Commissioner Urban and Commissioner Whitley, I think you have to hold to the same account every entity that wants to build in Matthews. I guess that's my thought process. So if you don't have some sort of accountability there, it might be a slippery slope where everyone kind of asks for the same delay. So I think we have to have some sort of accountability. I think that's our job as elected officials, is to make sure that things are held accountable.
Commissioner Urban, you got another comment? Or you just?
No, I'm waiting to hear a suggestion.
Is there any other comments?
Well, I heard a 5-year, and if you can get in and get started in phase 1 and 2, and then get this building and moving and come back 5 years, hopefully they'll be on their feet where they can move forward with it. And then it's still got to come back to us at some point. But I don't put no creeks in DOT. They have a lot of problems and they ain't willing nothing. Agreed. So for us to say DOT and we don't give them, they don't give us no timeline. We just heard that Independence is going to be delayed now. So DOT has got some problems. And I think for for us to hold this project up just because of the extension. I know it's gonna happen at some point, but I can't see it tonight, see it is happening. DOT with it.
Darren or Jay, can you maybe review for the applicant what the appeal procedure would be if they were in financial difficulty 5 years from now, and what's involved with that? Because I think their concern is that it's going to be an arduous process. That's what Pastor Denson suggested.
I'd imagine it would just be this process again, and we would just come back as a public improvements variance.
I mean, how many times have we changed the sundown on the Elizabeth Lane trailers? That they just come and ask for an extension. So I would like to put some kind of time limit on it, and I think 5 years is reasonable. We could conceivably go to 6 if we needed to, but would somebody like to make a motion to that effect?
Are you stipulating saying 5 years from today?
No, from certificate of occupancy of their first building.
If I could, 1 second. Staff would request that it would be from today. So the town doesn't issue building permits or certificates of occupancy. So if we issued it from today, right, we would have this, it would be internal. So we would have our own record.
I don't have a problem with that because, to Jeff's point, it was 2015. We're now in 2021. 6 years has gone by. I'd hate to see another 6 years go by, but if we did 5 years, they have every right to come back. It gives them time to construct this multi-purpose facility, probably get a year or two under their belt, and still have room in the 5 years.
Yeah.
So I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we approve the public improvement variance request based contingent to the improvements being completed 5 years from June 14th, 2021. Does that sound like a reasonable?
And again, can we, for the record, list what those improvements are so we're very clear?
So do we want to use a drawing, Will, or do we want to use just this memo? Or how do we want to capture the language? Do we want to use maybe attachment number 3, the proposed public improvement variance sheet SP-1?
Jay, could you pull that up?
It would be better if you could tie it to a document.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Are we talking about on Rice Road now? Are you going to seek to include Sam Newell on there?
You only have Rice Road documented. There's no conversation about sidewalk on Sam Newell.
Not Sam Newell.
Okay, this is just Rice Road. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Why is sidewalk labeled there on Sam Newell?
Is there a particular drawing you want to tie it to? You want to tie it to SP1 dated?
We could tie it back to that original 2015.
Let's tie it back to the visual labeled SP-1 dated 4/12/2021.
And John, I would second that if you could make sure that it's just Rice Road, not Sam Newell, even though it's in the drawing.
Yeah, there is no, the drawing makes no inference to Sam Newell sidewalk that I can tell. If someone, Chris, there's no, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay. Thank you.
And before we take the vote, I'd like to just add that this board, and I think all future boards, will be very considerate of any actions that NCDOT may be planning to make, and we're certainly not going to make you construct something that's going to be torn out immediately. So I think we can say this board and any future board would do the same from that respect. So we have a motion from Commissioner Urban, a second from Commissioner Whitley. I'll take a vote. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. I'm sorry. Commissioner Bland was against it. So it passes 6-1 with Commissioner Bland in opposition. All right, we'll move on to 9B, number 3, Administrative Amendment at Home 10101. Boy, say that quick. East Independence Boulevard. Darren, you're up again.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is an administrative amendment for rezoning 2011-580. That is for the Windsor Square Shopping Center. That's the side where Second and Charles, PetSmart, and the old Jcpenney are located. So the administrative amendment is for the old Jcpenney store. As part of that conditional rezoning, elevations were attached to the site plan and the conditional district. However, they were only attached for the Jcpenney store. And so the applicants now are asking to change those architectural standards. And then they also were requesting to make an addition in the parking area for a pickup area or pickup lane. So these are the new elevations. Yeah, if you could go back to the site plan. So this is the approved site plan for the shopping center, and then if you could just go to the next page for the. These are the approved elevations for the building currently. This is the old Jcpenney building. Apologies for the sizing on the PDFs. Or this one's fine right now. So for the elevation changes, this is primarily focused around this, or the major changes are primarily focused around the center, the main entrance of the building. Instead of going for those squared features, they are doing peaks. Right now, the tip peak sits at about 46 feet above grade. The maximums for the shopping center district, or the maximum height for the shopping center district is 50 feet, so it is under that. I believe they are also proposing to do a few material changes in a couple of places. One thing to note, but I wasn't able to get this into the packet beforehand, but the applicant did indicate that they were proposing a different change. So this small white area right here, they were actually proposing to extend that white painting all the way down to the grade. So this small gray or dark gray area right here, that'll actually be painted white. Yeah, if you go to the next slide. And then for the last piece of the administrative amendment, they are proposing a pickup area. This would just be, it would essentially be like over at Harris Teeter. By their main entrance, you would just pull off to the side. Employees would run out and then drop off your packages, and you would continue going. Some discussion from planning board that did come up is planning board did have some discussion about maybe adding some arrows or something just to note the direction of traffic for that. They're not planning to curb that outside. And then planning board did make a recommendation to approve the administrative amendment.
Jay, does the UDO require that they, on an administrative amendment that's being kicked up, they're not really supposed to make a recommendation? They either deal with it or they just let the board deal with it. I don't believe they're supposed to have a recommendation when they kick it up. I mean, it's okay, but I think technically they either deal with it or they kick it up. Yeah, and that's fine. It's in their memo, but I don't think that we need to have that in the record. And they don't need to make a finding, I don't think, since this is not a, yeah.
Commissioner Urban. All right, so I feel really old tonight. It's almost like a Crest query moment. I was around when we did the first petition. It was actually handled by Weaver Bennett Bland, Chuck Bennett. And if you go to the site plan, I don't know how many, there's a few board members here who've been around long enough and remember that parking lot. That parking lot did not have trees, islands. It had some, didn't have the pedestrian corridors for people to walk along and be safe. And that was all negotiated with Jcpenney as part of this administrative amendment. It's a much nicer parking lot today with the trees and planting and stuff like that. So in light of that same vein, just so you know that there was nothing there and Jcpenney's came in with their facade, we sort of debated the aesthetic issues, but we had a really good kumbaya moment. We came out of what I think was a win-win. I'm going to, in my opinion, ask the same of At Home this time to look at their facade a little bit more carefully, to soften the facade, maybe some additional canopies, do something. But they have this same facility in Pineville, and it's an elephant. I mean, it's a gray box, several hundred feet long, and we can't get these trees to grow large enough to hide this facade. I know they want to be seen, but from my opinion is Penny's was a refreshing, the color was kind of sparkling and that kind of thing and what have you, but this is really tamed down, and I think we need to work on getting them to soften this facade up a little bit to make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly in light of everything that was done in that parking lot.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
To Commissioner Urban's point, I'm looking at their facades at various locations online, and there's a stark difference between some facades and the others. So there's definitely a level of quality in some places that lacks in others. Are they planning to come to us and talk to us more? I mean, I would like to know, which variety of gray triangle we're getting.
I believe the architect is on the Zoom call.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner, do you have a particular location that you think is nicer than the others?
I'm not seeing actual locations. I'm just seeing furniture today has a facade that looks fairly nice, where the one on, I guess, At Home's website doesn't quite look as nice. Some materials look more substantial than others, and some of the awnings are more interesting. I just, it's hard to tell in these elevations what the building is going to look like. I would like
pretty plain.
Yeah, I would like to see something with a better understanding of the materials, and maybe to Commissioner Urban's point, the addition of some trees in the parking lot.
Yeah, I think we're all extremely grateful that somebody moved into that site or is proposing to move into that site instead of having an empty big box.
I guess, is the architect on there? Okay.
Hello. Hi, this is Raphael with Core States Group, representing the architect of record. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Can you give us a little more detail about the elevations are pretty simplistic, and we're wondering what exactly this is going to look like.
Sure. Yeah. So the elevations themselves, obviously, At Home is a cool gray color scheme that their branding is based upon. And so what we've tried to do is obviously maintain the majority of the existing Jcpenney building envelope, which is what you see as the light gray on all of your elevation, all the elevations that you're looking at. And then just removing and replacing the former brand entry with At Home's brand entry. And there is a canopy that's over that glass storefront that you see, and then the two-tone color palette of their gable house entries, with their letter set on there, and then the tagline off to the right. The remainder of the building, because there's an adjacent tenants, and then there's also a vacant space on the rear of the building that At Home is not acquiring, and that's why you see the rest of that earth tone and reddish pinkish hue, is because that's adjacent tenant space that is just not part of their lease. So that's why there's no improvements shown there. And then the remainder of the floor plan would indicate that we're just repurposing the existing receiving area, making no alterations there. So yes, I mean, that is the general design intent here, was to replace the existing brand with At Home's brand, and then to extend their color palette onto the elevations that they're leasing. And I can certainly answer more questions about the finishes. The finishes themselves would be EFIS there for the large dark gray house, and then EFIS for the light gray house on the right with low-E spandrel or low-E vision glass, and then an aluminum canopy that extends out to provide some cover for the customers coming into the building and from the customer pickup area.
Yes, as we look at the various designs online, and several of the commissioners are, you have some other at-home stores that have like a circular canopy in the front that have a different look to them. Is it, Mr. Urban, have you seen those?
Oh, I've seen them. I mean, and that's fine, but I just think the overall facade is it needs to be Matthews. I don't want to see something that's ubiquitous. This is 11 miles down the road in Pineville. You know, I want to see a pedestrian friendly. I want to see a softening up facade. Or should we start talking improvements in the parking lot with like more islands and planting trees? So pick your poison, but I really think that they could come to the table and soften that facade up a little bit. You could replicate the gable land over multiple times. You could do super graphics, logos, murals, whatever, but I ain't buying it.
Commissioner Whitley?
The store in Concord, is that front the same as the one in Pineville?
I'm not familiar with that store. If it has a radius or an arched entry element, it could be because that was an existing architectural element that was repurposed. But this is At Home's brand prototypical entry, which is that canopy that you see just between the second and third window sets.
Right, okay.
I think the one that, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
The one that I'm looking at, I think is Leesburg, Virginia, as best I can tell. It has like a darker gray canopy. Sorry. And there's more spatial sort of differentiation between the house shapes, as you call them. There's something about that appears less generic, and I think that would speak to Commissioner Urban's point.
I mean, there's some elements they have, like a trellis system or a covered walkway there that protects you from the elements. I mean, I grant it's your brand, but if you look at the franchises in the town of Matthews, they have all worked. Discount Tire, you know, you name it, they have all worked very hard to be a little bit more unique in Matthews and to accommodate us on some of these things. And I think you could probably cobble something together from all the bits and pieces that you have, but I'm not going to accept what we have in Pineville here.
This is the town manager. I think the other issue is what the board's looking at is like, I'm sure there's a term for it, but you get no feel for what the end product is going to look like. It's just like an
very flat 2D.
Yeah, it's an architectural, but it gives us no feel of what are we going to see an end product. I think the board would like to see that.
Can they give us a couple different options with the same?
Yeah, that would be my suggestion, is if the applicant would consider a deferral and come back maybe in a month and show us some additional elevations. Commissioner Urban mentioned trees. I see Leanne Moore in the audience. We served on the tree board together for many years. So a lot of people in the room love trees. So trees are good, including myself. So yay, trees.
I think you said pick your poison. I think you said either the building change or the tree.
I guess, are y'all able to hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, I can hear you, Scott.
Yeah, this is Scott Fertitta. I'm a development manager with At Home Stores, and appreciate all the discussion. I know that aesthetics can be somewhat subjective, and I guess I just wanted to make a few comments and things for you to consider, and then we'll try to certainly address your concerns. But the elevation and what you see here is really, we started with kind of the the Jcpenney facade that was there. And I think we didn't really have much in terms of an understanding of any requirements, whether it be facade changes to what we're leasing or changes to the parking area based on, Matthew's regulations and development, planning and development requirements. So I guess one thing we would ask if we're going to come back is, working with Darren and with you all about what specifically are we looking to adhere to. We really did take our brand, which is a cool gray color. It's subjective of whether you really like that. And then we took the Jcpenney square element and put what we think is a very attractive kind of house element with some, from some pricey storefront glass and an awning. And it's just that at-home brand. And we changed the colors. And that's what we thought was really meeting, Matthew's requirements and really within line with the existing facade, just really changing the colors and changing the entry element. So I guess I would just ask maybe for some direction and guidance if we're going to do something else that's subjective, which these are all subjective things. We really like this facade and it speaks to At Home's brand, and we've done it, many places. It is our prototypical design. So I'm not sure, we're just not real clear on what changes to make and any guidance you can provide, whether it's tonight or Darren and his team can work with us to provide that. But this was really, if you look at the facade now, it's changing the colors, not trying to impose or impede on it, and then adding At Home's, what we think is an attractive entry element.
This is Mayor John Higdon, and I'm probably the least prescriptive person that's ever been elected in Matthews. I pretty much let people build what they want unless it's really unattractive. And in this case, I tend to agree with Commissioner Urban in that there is a whole lot of gray, this light gray, elephant gray color on a really large surface that's going to kind of blend right into the asphalt of the parking lot. And it does need something. I wouldn't recommend doing really expensive changes to the facade, but if you can, as Commissioner Urban said, soften it or add a canopy or some kind of splash of color or something, it's really, really gray, would be my comment. Commissioner Bland, did you have a comment a minute ago?
I was just commenting that, it seems out of context with all the other things out there in that shopping center. That's what would be sort of stand out. Like the only thing that would sort of be similar to it would be the captain, the blue.
Yeah.
That's the only piece of thing out there that's not basically correct.
That's right. Mayor Pro Tem Garner, do you have a comment?
I did find the location of the front that I'm looking at, and it is in Noonan, Georgia. It has a long sort of canopy that really accentuates the sidewalk, so it adds to that pedestrian activity, and the variation in the shapes and the depth on the shapes is really interesting, and that may be only because what we're seeing is so flat looking. But I think, to Commissioner Urban's point, the extending trellises up the side, we had another business do that here, a medical center, and that really activates the space and adds a little bit of green to it, just to make it more interesting, but not to detract from your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to be clear that we're not asking you to at all change your brand or your logo or trademark or whatever. The house theme is nice. And again, we're very thankful that somebody is wanting to move into that space so quickly after Jcpenney left. Are there any other comments, Commissioner McCool?
I mean, we talk about Matthews being Matthews, maybe even a tasteful mural on that gray to represent Matthews. I think that would help too, add a little bit of color and break up the gray and kind of show that you're excited to be in our community.
Yes, we are.
So the one that we're looking at that's in Noonan, Georgia is further broken up with some white, and the example that we were shown was all either the at-home house part was a darker gray, and then the entirety of the rest of the building with a one little white stripe was all the same color of gray. So I think just breaking it up even with some white just gives them give some definition and a little, I don't know.
Articulation.
That's the word.
Okay, understood.
I think if you could just give us a little bit better elevations and take into consideration some of the comments that were made. We're not asking you to do something, you know, outrageously expensive, but just change it. And I don't know, Mr. Urban, you're the architect amongst us.
I know in 15 minutes, the architect can sketch out 6 different ideas. So let them have 6 different ideas. I think it needs to be pedestrian friendly, pedestrian scaled, break up the mass of that gray. You've got bay rhythms in here that aren't being explored. You don't have any scale except that centerpiece that's being explored. To Commissioner Bland's point, there is a smaller scale to the rest of the shopping center. And the only reason that Penny's really got away with what it did is that the trade-off of all the work they did in that parking lot, the landscaping, the trees, the islands, that was that compromise. So we're beyond that now. So now we're talking about the specific building. So, you know, canopies, awnings, coverings, color. There's just so many things paint goes a long way and it's not that expensive, but there needs to be some effort here. In the town of Matthews, we expect effort.
So we have a motion to defer for a month, if that's acceptable to the applicant?
Yes.
To the July 12th meeting?
I'll make a motion to defer this to the July 12th meeting.
I have a second.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Cool, second from Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to see some renderings between now and then?
Well, you'll see them on 12th, I would hope. Yep.
Can we see them before the 12th? And that way we can pretty much decide.
I'm not designing this, ask them.
Well, I mean, you the one that push it for.
You'll see it on the Wednesday before the 12th.
All right, no problem. All right.
Okay, we have a motion that's by Commissioner McCool, second from Mayor Pro Tem Garner. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. So thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Darren. All right, item 9B4, discuss issues relating to zoning conditions at 433 East John Street. We'll listen to this one and then take a quick break because we're getting kind of long here. So, Jay, you're up, sir.
Tobacco. You chew?
So staff was requested to provide an update to the Strong Haven site at 433 East John Street. As you all will recall, in late 2019, a change of conditions, or rather conditional zoning was approved at the site, stipulated the removal of the truck access on John Street to a new drive on Charles Buckley Way. That was structured such that the applicant had 1 year from the time of issuance of building permits to complete the improvements. Building permits were issued in July of 2020, which would have created a deadline of July of 21 for the installation of the improvements and the closure of the truck driveway on John Street. However, in March of 2020, the governor issued Executive Order 316, which established the original state of emergency related to COVID-19. Subsequent to that, there was a bill in the House that essentially, and Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong with this language, gave a pass for development approvals. So it was essentially a blanket extension, and it alleviated developers, property owners, anyone from having to comply with any sort of timeframes. So from staff and the town's perspective, and from Charlie's legal opinion, there's essentially nothing that we can do to compel the property owner to complete these improvements per the zoning requirements, which would have been next month. I did reach out to the law firm that assisted Strong Haven with the zoning. I just received that letter, I think at 4 o'clock today, from attorney that represents them. Actually, that's their in-house legal representative that's issued this letter that states that they are working to remedy the situation. But this is just an update. I don't have any, solutions for you here, but just wanted to give everyone an update on what's going on.
I'd like just to offer a comment for the record. I think most people, or certainly the people in this dais, know that I worked at Combraco Industries for many years on Matthews Mint Hill Road. And I heard complaints about this property back in the 90s. So this has been going on for decades. And I mean, when I became an elected official, I heard complaints like daily when I went to work, like, hey, how come these guys can park a truck in the middle of the road while I'm trying to get to work? So I'm very concerned about this. I think Stronghaven's been a very important community partner. They've employed many of our residents for many years, but Governor Cooper's order could be in effect for years. I mean, it literally, with the variants that are around, there could be some version of Governor Cooper's directive in place for a couple more years. And so are we going to wait a couple more years before they, in good faith, make these changes? We've waited long enough, and I really hope that in an effort to be a good corporate neighbor to the town, they would go ahead and undertake this construction as soon as possible. And I heard a complaint this week about this very issue. It's continual. I mean, every time I'm in public, somebody says, hey, how come those guys are still pulling trucks in and blocking John Street off? So I just, urge them in the spirit of being a good corporate neighbor to the town of Matthews, as they have been for many decades, to consider doing this as soon as possible and not use this loophole to wait forever to make this improvement. We've given them ample time. How long was the initial? We have 12 months, and it was apparent we saw nothing even started, that they had no intention of doing it anytime soon. But using this as an excuse for indefinite period of time going forward is unacceptable. And I don't know what our recourse is, but this is a major inconvenience to a lot of people in our town and those that pass through our town. And I hope that Stronghaven will do the right thing. Anybody else have any comments on that? Or Commissioner McCool?
I know a lot of people who go to Central Piedmont Community College down the road, and when they're trying to get to class, they've complained to me like, there's a tractor trailer doing a 3-point turn in the middle. I'm late to class, so I've heard it from a bunch of people, and so I've been stuck behind it, and it's deeply frustrating when I mean, these truck drivers must be real good, because I don't know how they can do that on.
Thread the needle to get in there. That's
yeah,
for sure.
but yeah, this needs to be fixed as soon as possible. It's frustrating that they're trying to use a loophole in it. It's not the right thing to do, and we'd expect them to be good stewards of the town.
Can I ask staff to draft a letter, or do I need to draft a letter to them to ask them to?
So we're happy to draft a letter. I did ask Town Clerk Lord Canapino to reach out to Rachel Hunt's office and arrange a meeting for you and I and anybody else on the board, as long as it's not, well, if it's more than 3, then we need to notice as a public meeting, but really kind of explain, is this the intention? Is the governor intended this? I mean, I get the aspect or the concept, but this really has negative consequences for our community.
Unintended consequence, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it was a state statute that adopted this during the COVID time period. And so the governor's order didn't deal with this. It was a state statute that dealt with this.
So you're saying it's not the governor that can overturn it, it's the General Assembly.
Yeah, it was a state COVID law that extended all development plans and approvals 4 months beyond the time period the governor's order is rescinded. So Rachel Hunt would be the appropriate person right now to talk to.
Okay, if there's no other comments on this item, let's go ahead and knock out the consent agenda very quickly, and
I'll
then
make a motion that we approve consent agenda 8 through.
No, that was very quickly.
Yeah.
That was very quickly. Johnny on the spot there. Thank you, Commissioner Whitley. We have a second.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Bland. All in favor? All opposed? That passed unanimously. Let's take a 5-minute break, because I think some people have been waiting a long time to go to the next few items. And 5-minute break, and let's come right back. Thank you. Item number 11, receive a Matthews Veterans Memorial Park design update from Mr. King.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Board. Goal for tonight is to provide an update to the town board about where we are in the Stumptown Park, Matthews Veterans Memorial Park design process. So staff is working with Stewart Engineering, who are doing a great job. They conducted a stakeholder meeting, the first one on May 12th, received information from, I'll call it long list of participants, general public, Veterans Advisory Committee, certainly the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, and the American Legion. Got a lot of comments, used this information to create where you're gonna see in a moment these 4 draft illustrations. I do wanna share a couple of comments that were shared during the May 12th meeting. So the question was asked, what does success look like? What are your concerns? And just some themes that Stewart didn't use to create these 4 options are, well, they include, tie our past to our future, meditation, space, history, education component, veterans always have a space, balance, scale, respecting traditional uses for the park, smart park design, the memorial remaining the highlight of the area, and a place for celebration. So what they did was certainly attempt to create design that reflected daily use as well as these celebrations that we're all very familiar with. And actually, can you move to page 4? Yeah. So in this first illustration, the dug-in plaza illustration, it does have a column gateway with pavers that cross the existing sidewalk, and again with the columns.
Would you highlight that with the cursor so we can follow as you talk?
So we're looking in this area right here near the, this is the public display of affection, to give you a reference. Again, pavers crossing the existing sidewalk. The granite monuments stay in their existing position, and these are ground level pavers sort of leading people from the grass to right in front of the memorial, the monuments. This is existing grass seating, enhanced memorial plaza where the brick area is expanded into the lawn. Again, this is conceptual, so no specs on the actual depth of it, but it is enhanced. And also a meditation garden here where it is cut into the bank. These dots represent additional seating. And then there's a bookend column gateway on the west side here. I'll also share, there was, call it confusion about what was shared as far as what the boundary for the Veterans Memorial Park. And you see, Stewart did a good job of sort of highlighting what they were actually looking at. So this is washed out. So what you see up here is all colored. So they looked at it completely from this boundary to this boundary. And you'll see also, it does extend far below the sidewalk on his edge. But what they did was, looking at, call it logical park design, it made sense to evaluate the column gateway in this position as opposed to just looking at what was shown as, what could be interpreted as the boundary. It made sense to put it here. And also a question about the gateway in this position as opposed to over here. There were no comments that in any way described eliminating or reducing the square footage of the playground, which is right now, right here. So that honestly was not a obvious launch point to start a conversation. Again, it was a logical positioning to place it here. Looking at the Monumental Plaza look, in this option, it does balance out the positioning of the memorial, I keep messing with those memorial stones. It moves 3 of them or balances them between the left and the right of the Memorial Plaza. We do show a park entry. In this case, it could be something vertical, could be something ground level, but just identifying a park entry, some enhanced concrete, maybe it's a different coloration to highlight the area. And here we we're very deliberate about enhancing this look of this historic walk, where it would be colored either, whatever material I guess is decided upon, if it's pavers, but it would be highlighted in red. And then continuing this theme heading west, again, bookend park entry on this side. Scroll down. Now we have the Memorial Walk version. This repositions the memorial stones. It does create this walkway into this area, semicircle design. In this option, it does show a tree or a plant. I do think a bench, could fit well on that site. That was some of the discussion from the meeting last Wednesday to provide additional seating. This Memorial Plaza, again enhanced, does show a seat wall with some additional landscaping. And you can't really tell, but there's additional columns here and here that again would highlight the Memorial Plaza area. And again, continuing it to the west with another bookend park entry design right here. And then the Memorial Walk alternative, simply, essentially the same elements. It does remove the seat wall. So in this, it is, again, that enhanced Memorial Plaza, the look of the entryway into the historic walk. Each version, it does have enhanced landscape to the north of the area. And that's pretty much that's it. And again, this is the launch point we're at right now. So staff is still reviewing it, have additional meetings with some other members of town staff. Had some good conversations with Doug Rose today. And also I'm gonna reach out directly to veterans, get some honest feedback on it, and go from there. But again, this is the launch point. The stakeholders were told to look at this as a buffet. They can, certain things they like, pull it from here, put it in there, and we'll, I guess, ultimately figure out what is presented to the town board later on as the, I guess, three conceptual designs, or three conceptual options that are going to be presented.
All right, does that conclude your presentation?
That concludes my presentation. Again, no ask tonight, just any feedback if you do have it.
So I heard quite a bit of feedback from several veterans about the extent of the park and the apparent exclusion of the park, of this whole area, from what this board designated as the park boundaries. So I'm just wondering, why do all of them stop like right here?
I mean, again, there were no comments about reducing or removing the playground, and it was a logical point to put it right here. I mean, this is call it the columns, the designated boundary, or what you feel as a sense of what the park is can certainly be, here. This is just physically where these columns are.
So is there a playground entity, or whatever you call it, like right there?
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
I was kind of surprised at the lack of imagination with these designs. I know that's not a good way to lead it. They had a big task to juggle all of the voices competing to have a say in this. But I wonder why the column, the left side is left out. And you say it's, why, like the playground is there and there's no need to eliminate the playground. But if the Veterans Memorial Park is not necessarily a somber place, why the playground couldn't be incorporated, or there could be play elements that sort of introduce children to the idea of what a veteran is. And that could, to me, could make it more exciting of a design proposal. A lot of this really isn't different from the suggestions we had just from getting public stakeholders. So I would like to see them come back with something that stretches the imagination a little bit, engages people, rather than being so passive.
Okay.
Commissioner McCool?
I too, like the mayor, have also heard the frustrations of, of a third of the park basically being cut off. I remember fairly clearly that we delineated that whole section to be the park, and then to have it, okay, well, this is where the actual entrance things are, is frustrating to say the least. I think it was the direction of the board that that park would start there. There would be something there, and then it would go all the way to the other side where we had designated it. And so, that needs to be done. Again, I don't know what that looks like. I'm not a designer or an architect, but it needs to start where we said it should start. I mean, I think it's pretty simple.
Again, it was never an intent to reduce the size of it. It was just the placement of the column. Which
I think some of the frustrations I heard was a group of veterans, about 10 of them, cleaned this area up, and there was a lot of debris and a telephone pole and everything else laying in there. And now they're telling me, well, we cleaned all this up as part of the park, and now it's not even a part of it, apparently. So
no, I think that's just confusion. I mean, everything that's colored is represented as part of
Commissioner Bland.
I'm just curious, this is what it looks, this picture, the photograph is what it looks like right now, correct? Okay. I just wish I could have seen it from a couple different angles of like sort of what's over right at the edge. I want to see, look around, see what's over on the other side of the picture. I can't see just that little slice of it. I'd like to see what from a different angles. It'd give me a lot better idea. Maybe I should just go walk out there later on tomorrow or something and look at it better. But I was just trying to see what's over there. It's sort of hard to understand with these drawings. And I don't understand exactly what these different things are. It says granite monument with pavers, and then meditation garden. I mean, that doesn't really tell me much about what it looks like unless someone's got some kind of, is there a drawing of what they're proposing, or?
Well, we're purely at the conceptual level with this.
Well, maybe, like I said, I'm asking questions too soon or something, but I'm just curious. I don't have any earthly idea. I want, that's what it looks like now. I'll go out there and look at what it looks like tomorrow morning. And then, I can ask maybe better, more intelligent questions, but I'm not exactly sure
So
what.
there's the playground piece.
Playground right there.
Who's driving, Jay? I'm sorry, can you go back to the picture that was just up? So I think when this board voted and we tried to better delineate the space, because Commissioner Miller asked, what are we voting on exactly? And I just want to reiterate that, we said that, I think there it goes. We said that the path would, start down over here somewhere and go along the sidewalk all the way to the other side, and it could be as big as 4 feet extending in this direction. So my point is that this is a very, very small chunk of Stumptown Park. It's I don't know, 5%, less than 10% certainly. So I don't think it's too big of an ask to ask, that the entire area. Corey, what you're saying is there is no reduction in size, that it is there. You're just saying that the entrance is at a different position, or I'm not. It looks like if you put the entrance right here, that this area over here is excluded.
Yeah, I mean, the only option is to, like I said, put it in the playground. And we're talking columns. Now, it could be a column on the opposite side, and on the inside, it does become this new piece of equipment that, makes it enhanced. And again, we're sort of still spitballing. We're taking what we got on the 12th, looking at comments from last Wednesday, and still trying to finalize, what is going to come to the board.
So Corey, what I'm hearing from at least the majority of the board is it doesn't feel like the renderings activated the upper left-hand side of the park, and that they would like to see that activated. And I don't know what that means or looks like, but it sounds like that's what the board would like to see right there, or put that cursor there, that area right.
And now, the other one was, almost all the way down here.
But I didn't hear anybody on the board uncomfortable, like what you're saying. If you want to go by the red line, quote unquote, that kind of goes on the other side of the red line, right? Stumptown Park. But I'm not hearing anybody on the board uncomfortable with that, but really what's important is to go north and west.
Yeah.
That section in there, and what can be activated now? Maybe it's future. I don't. Maybe it's future area.
It could be future area, but I think the veterans want to know that that's a piece of their quote unquote park.
Yeah, veterans felt like by being silent, it meant not for them. You know, that sounds like what you're saying. That's not the intent. It just wasn't activated.
Yeah, I think it was. If you go back to the other picture, it was captured in that general heading, enhanced landscaping. That's at the top of the page. You see, well, it's in black and it's in a dark green. So this is all enhanced landscaping that certainly extends the full stretch across the back.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner, you have a comment, question?
I think that the term enhanced landscaping is so vague, it just doesn't, it doesn't mean anything to us. Okay. It just means that that area is green.
Yeah, okay. Okay, we'll certainly use that and continue to develop.
I hate to use the word delineation, but I think this board and all stakeholders need a better delineation of the two separate areas to clearly show where they are.
Okay.
And I do think some are stronger than others, if you want to hear that, or some of the designs are stronger than other designs.
Yeah.
Of these four, personally, I mean, the one that's titled Monumental Plaza is pretty stagnant.
Okay.
Seeing a better understanding of what a dug-in plaza means could bring some interest to, could make that more interesting to me. To me, it doesn't mean much, I guess, is what I'm saying. And then the one that's Memorial Walk, I'd like to see that fleshed out a little more.
Okay. Commissioner McCool?
I mean, I guess I'm still confused. I mean, yeah, it's colored in on this picture, so you're saying that's part of the park, but if the actual things that they want to build are there, any person with common sense is going to say that's the park and that's a separate piece. I mean, it's kind of one of those things as, that's where we said we wanted to start. Make sure it says that's where it's going to start. And if that is where the two pillars go, that's where they go. I don't think it's that hard of a task.
Yeah, and I think, Hazen, you gave some clarification when we voted on this. We said it could be this sidewalk and up to 4 feet beyond it, but it also in areas could be all the way up adjacent to it. So it could literally wrap around the playground area. But again, there has been some talk about, maybe including, and I understand that piece of playground equipment is not functional or not fully working right now. Is that true?
It has malfunctioned a couple of times.
So, I mean, we probably need to replace it anyway.
Yeah.
Whatever the piece is.
We have, right, we have the piece. We said, well, we're going to replace it, see if that does the trick.
And if it doesn't, we have to look. If it doesn't, replacement part doesn't work, then we may have to replace it.
I'm always down to replace some playground equipment.
Commissioner Urban.
Conceptual is just that, conceptual. It could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different folks. I think we got to not worry about trying to stuff all four corners with something. Sometimes less is more. And I think the designer is probably going to come in and talk to this as you get further along, correct?
Yes.
And I would hope that they would provide images of, what is a non-delineated paver versus a sunken plaza, and show images that might help the board sort of discuss things. Because my read is, if there's playground equipment there, the designer did not want to go and grab that playground area. I mean, we're talking about active and passive. We're talking about somber and things like that. And if you've been to the National Mall, about the way those monuments are set up, less is more is actually, a lot of green space around them. So it focuses on that element. If you try and pack every corner with something, you begin to water down the effect. So I think it would be helpful for the designer to sort of talk about what their thought process was. I mean, trying to focus on the plaza a little bit and doing different things, but I can understand why they stayed away from the child's play area. I mean, yeah, you could say, give me something different that engages the play area with it, but it's been sort of a national iconography of sculpture gardens and memorials in this nation to be a place of very somber reflection. And I'm sure the designer is grappling with that aspect of it. I mean, I actually, you know, this says Duggan Plaza. That is one of the types of ways of doing a memorial, as evidenced by the Vietnam Memorial, which sort of set the terms for that. So I think we just need to sort of wait it out a little bit, see what the designer comes back with, because he may have been trying to sort of give that green space so your focus is on something more predominant and it's not being watered down. So that's just my guess at this stage in the game, but we'll just let it ride out a little bit. We were only talking conceptual.
A couple comments, and you know, the emails have been flying back and forth. So nobody told the consultant not to do anything here. Is that correct? Nobody from the town. This is all the consultant decided to do this. I think the concern of the veterans, a couple other comments. First of all, this was never intended to be a really somber place that you go to, you know, bury your head and cry. That was made very clear by the veterans. They wanted a celebratory place that was, you could recognize veterans, but still be, you know, a place of joy. This is not a cemetery. It's not a place where, you know, you wear all black and hang your head. So they wanted this to be more of a celebratory place. And also, I don't think there's an immediate plan necessarily to put something here, but the veterans were just concerned that that had been carved out and was no longer part of their park. And we voted to include that portion. And that was the concern. Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Well, I was going to echo that, that the intention, I think, from what I've heard, is that this was to be an interactive educational space focused on veterans and their service. I think that opportunity is what I feel like is missing. There is a sort of somberness to this that I think it would be more interesting if it weren't.
And I also add, we added this meeting in direct response. There was only one stakeholder meeting scheduled. And then it was, we need to meet again. And these are literal hand sketches. So they put something together to share at this next, the meeting we had last Wednesday. So when we do bring it back, it will certainly have a lot more detail.
Well, to echo what Mayor Pro Tem Garner said, I think having it more interactive and educational, I mean, the idea was to bring children and stuff here to learn about the veterans and to also clearly show that the park extends all the way across, at least adjacent to the sidewalk, and everything north up here would be good. That would be my feedback. That's the concerns that I heard from veterans that talked to me, and I don't know if anybody else has any further comments. It's getting really late, so I guess when are we going to? This is going to come back on the next meeting?
No, best guess right now is likely in August. They're going to spend some more time putting this together. But yeah, we don't have a prescribed date at this point.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay. Thank you, Corey. Right. Go on to new business. Item 12A, consider acceptance of American Rescue Plan funding. Teresa Falk.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. What you have before you right now is part of the requirements from the federal government for the ARPA funds that were the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA as we've come to call it, was signed into law on March the 11th of this year. And part of the guidance and the stipulations, which we have also consulted with the town attorney, and he is in agreement that there is a requirement that the governing board of the town vote to accept these funds. This does nothing for saying anything about how we're going to spend the funds or setting up the fund, that once the funds are actually here, we will come back. I will have to come back to you because we will have to set up a separate fund to track this money, which is another stipulation that the federal government has put on this money so that it is kept separate from all other town money. So this is simply a resolution for the governing board of the town of Matthews to accept the ARPA funds that are estimated to be at least $9.7 million, which will come in two different payments to the town. The first half being received sometime in the near future, and then the second half coming 12 months later.
Thank you. What do you say, guys? Do we want 10 million or not?
Yeah. Just can't use it.
Right.
It's fun to look at.
It's fun to look at, right? Put it in the glass box. Yeah. Commissioner Whitley.
Yeah.
Sufficient. Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Whitley, a second from Commissioner Miller. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go on to 12B, select a consultant for the 335 East Matthews Street visioning process. Mr. Camp.
All right, as you all recall, back in April, we were directed to seek design firms to create some conceptual plans for the potential development of the property at 335 East Matthews Street. We issued an RFP, sent it out to 14, I think it was 14 different firms, and posted it on the town's website. Received 6 proposals. You see here the firms that submitted proposals and of course, the dollar amount. And I'm sure you all have read all 181, I think is that 180 pages.
Yes.
We've got, you have? Oh, yeah. Okay. We did include those for context, just so you all could see the same thing that staff was evaluating. Our scoring ranked Stewart the highest, and from a budgeting perspective, in the current planning budget, we identified up to $15,000 that could be expended for this project. So we really only had 2 firms that submitted proposals that were within the budget that we could spend in the current fiscal year. So again, the recommendation is Stewart. You can read and of course we were just talking about them 5 minutes ago. They did have a lot of experience with similar projects, not only in Matthews, but doing conceptual design for town of Holly Springs and their town hall, I think the town of Ranlow, and a few other communities around the state. So, and that's where we're at tonight. Happy to hear any questions you have about the process.
If you were allowed to exceed the $15,000, who would you have chosen?
It's a good question. I felt that ESP was perhaps more than we need. It was really structured to as if we were the owner, the builder, and we are not going to construct this. This is purely,
right.
We might use these images if we issue an RFP to sell the property to the development community. But I felt that was to develop. It was going a little bit above and beyond what our needs are today. So we really liked Cluck and Block Design. They submitted a joint, and as did Stewart. They are partnering with a local architecture firm, but I think Cluck would bring more, we'd probably get some good visuals by bringing an architecture firm as well. So they wouldn't just be flat horizontal drawings. You might have some really good 3D renderings of what this development might look like. So I did think that they had a good kind of creative and unique proposal. And they have done some work in the town, mostly the Baptist Temple is Cluck. You'll see that in the RFP response.
Commissioner Miller, do you have a comment?
My only comment is the fear that Stewart just submitted 4 or 6 drawings for the Veterans Memorial Park, and they were so vague and lacking detail that is my expectation too high that we would see more detail in this project?
Can I answer that real quick? So Corey wasn't originally scheduled to come give a report out today tonight because everything was so high level and conceptual. However, based on the concern of the veterans community about what they were seeing even at the conceptual level, Corey said, or we said, look, let's put it on there and let y'all give us feedback. So I'd hate to judge them on such an early product.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I guess when I was looking at the drawings, though, I was kind of expecting to see a horizontal drawing, you know, where I can see that the columns, there's two of them.
Vertical.
Vertical, whatever it is. I wanted to see an elevation, so to speak, so you can get some scale or I couldn't tell from the drawings whether there were one column or two columns, one on each side of the sidewalk, and it seemed kind of vague. I understand why maybe it was brought forward, but I guess I just would like to see something more finished.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Jay, do you have a third group you'd look at if you were?
So Colgan Nest, I was really kind of surprised. They did the conceptual plans, if you will recall, the Phillips House process, Reed House about 5 years ago. The Landmarks Commission engaged Colgan Nest to do some of the conceptual plans to help the Landmarks Commission determine what to do. I was a little surprised they didn't use that as an example because there was some quality work that was done. So just maybe a lack of communication in their office. Their site planning, I think, would be good. They were very light, I felt, on the architectural side of it. So I don't think we would get very good visuals. We would probably have to go back and discuss with them if they wanted to partner with an architecture firm like some of the other groups have proposed. But I think they're a very reputable local firm in the Charlotte region. They did good work.
Thank you. I would like to suggest that we defer this, and because I didn't have time to read a 400-page packet since Wednesday. I would like to read all 181 pages. I have looked through some of them, but I haven't gotten that in depth, and would like to have the time to do that. And you know, I would take 2 weeks if the board wants more than that as a consensus. That would be okay as well. But
is that a motion to defer to the 28th?
that is a motion.
Is there any additional work you want staff to do in the next 2 weeks, or just let this ride for now?
Well, I mean, part of my initial response is what Commissioner Miller said, and that I understand that those drawings were conceptual, so they're very basic and not detailed, but I did feel like they were not quite as imaginative as they could have been. I was, just by looking through it with Cluck and Block, I think, you know, this important sort of lot that goes into Matthews Station could be in really interesting space, and I think it takes an imaginative firm to do that. So, I mean, that's just where I am as I'm looking through it.
Okay.
Just want to second your motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Garner to defer the decision on this to the 28th of June, 2 weeks from now. Second from Commissioner Bland. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously.
I do have a list for Jay, though, because
Okay,
I
sure.
think in order to, I would look at the deliverables between the various groups, because some were being more illustrative, others are being more 3D, and I think that's a good comparison. My question to you would be is, what is your end goal? Because in my mind, I would want less architecture to allow that to happen later, but there may be a thought process that want more architecture. But if we're not building this thing, we just need to have the what ifs, the economics of this thing, the massing, the understanding of all the possibilities, and let the future behold the creativity coming out of it. So sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot by saying, oh, well, take the master plan for the sportsplex that we did 17 years ago. It had so much detail. We're like, yeah, you got to build it just like that. I don't want to be there. But if you could just give those sort of, this group is doing these renderings, they're doing these illustrations, they're doing X, Y, Z, you might be able to again begin to compare deliverables and understand why someone's at $47,000 and someone's at $8,000.
Fair point. I'll just add, I purposely included perspective renderings of massing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does not necessarily need to be a perfect 3D rendering of the exact building. We don't
Right.
necessarily want to constrain a future developer, but at the same time, if we're trying to build consensus on what this should look like,
Yep.
and what is a 1-story versus a 2-story versus 3-story, we need
I
at
would agree
least
with you
that
there.
level of detail.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay.
That it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to 12C, consider request for exemption from ordinance 93.06B to allow fundraising event in Stumptown Park. Corey, you're up again.
Yes, so we have been working with Happiness Through Grace, because they are not a nonprofit group, but they did prove a relationship with the Matthews Help Center, and that sort of checks that box, for at least for as far as staff is concerned. Again, they do want to have a 5K race that would begin and end in Stumptown Park, and I guess the piece that involves the board is that they would like to have fundraising, and so this is an ask with staff support to exempt Happiness Through Grace from ordinance that prohibits fundraising in the park.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or motions? Commissioner Miller.
I'll make a motion that we approve the request for exemption to ordinance 93.06B prohibiting fundraising in public parks for the Happiness Through Grace 5K race on October 2nd, 2021, between the hours of 6 a.m. and 12 noon.
Second.
Oh, seconded by the whole board, I think.
They're getting desperate now.
I have a motion from Commissioner Miller, second from Commissioner Urban. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Give a very quick mayor's report. Yesterday, I attended, along with Paul and Joanne in the back, the event Godspell at Stumptown Park. And like I said when I was able to stand up on stage there, I'm continuously amazed the excellence of the acting and singing and dancing, and how well the park space was laid out for that event. It was sold out last night, and they were turning people away at the door. So it was a great event. I want to urge the public to take advantage of all the things that we're starting to open up, the things that Leanne's starting to do with special events. It's exciting. People are happy. There are a lot of smiles on people's faces. They're just happy to get out of their house and go enjoy something outside. So fantastic event. I really enjoyed it, and kudos to Matthews Playhouse. Attorney's report.
No report.
Town manager's report.
No report.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you for your